All right. Alrighty. I think we are good. Yeah, and then if I do this. Yep, it's still there. Good, good, good. Ay, ay, ay. Hey, Victor, welcome to the chat. Good to see you. May the 4th be with you. Ay, 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 ay. Whew. I'm playing this game again, chat. What am I supposed to do? Where's the Firelink conspiracy video, Loki? Hey, no, Bray. We'll see. We'll see. We got some. Ah! Woo! Well, you know, it's a Loki stream. It's gonna be a long one today. We got quite a few videos to get through, so we'll see. We'll see if we'll get to any conspiracy vids. Conspiracy theories. More DS2! Yay! Yeah, I am. It's more DS2. Oh, yay. The good news is that with these vids in the background, at the very least, I can distract myself from this utter shite. So, that's gonna be good. I also leveled myself up a little bit. Did a little bit of farming in Haida before we started, just to make sure that, you know, I'm not feeling as rusty as I was the first stream. Starting to get back into it, and hey, I'm now falling myself off cliff, so clearly, this must be a proper soul stream now. Anyway, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. Now, you guys gave me some suggested videos, including Firelink Conspiracy. We'll see, we'll get there. I'm also adding to the docket one that I'm actually personally interested in that came out today by Smotown, so I'm looking forward to listening to that one too, but we'll see. These are some long vids we're getting through, some of these, so like, it may be a while. And knowing me, because I like to sometimes pause to kind of like, you know, add a little bit more commentary to what I'm listening to. I don't know, we'll see, we'll see. We shall see. We plan to talk about DS2 Twin Blades lore. What lore exactly would I be talking about, Nobre? Like, which part would you think I need to focus on? Like the Eastern angle of it? I guess I could look more into that, see if there's any historical example that's being referenced there. Hey, it's good to see DS2 after losing 2 hours of progress in Persona 3. You lost 2 hours of progress in P3? What happened, IM? Did the autosave corrupt or something? What the hell? How the hell does that happen? Alright, chat, you know. Listen, chat. Before we get started, I'm gonna be opening this thing. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Chat, I love you, but we gotta deal with this stupid ladder. Like them being from Far East. Yeah, I could do some more looking into that and see if there's a good place for that. Ah! Not rusty anymore, by the way. Woo! Alright, this is a bit awkward when you're... There we go. This is a bit awkward when you're... Oh, cool, I can do this with just soul arrows now. Awesome. Howdy, Xavier. Good to see you there. I forgot to say. You forgot to save? Like, did you forget to save and it was like your, what's the word? Your power went out or something? Like, how do you, like, don't they tell you, hey, save and then leave? Like, how, or did you, like, exit directly out of the game without, like, actually going through the manual exit process? Like, how does that work? I'm really curious. I died. Wait, which version of P3 are you playing? I thought it was... It's not reloaded? It's the OG? Oh. Oh. Oh, yeah, that'll do it. Oh, no. Oh, no, the good old days. Oh, no! Alright, come on. Whoop. Asshole. Oh! There we go. Alright. Got rid of this asshole. The remake doesn't have... Wait. You're telling me Reloaded doesn't have autosaves either? Are you kidding me? How the hell? It's 2025! Why would you not include that? What is this? Alright, let's open this door. Oh. I'm amazed this guy doesn't have a fire arrow just to make my life extra hell, you know? I'm surprised that the DS2 devs were that restrained. Alright, how the hell... How?! Wait, huh? Huh? I don't understand this. Alright, we're dealing with this. Hello? Just remember to hit the button, stupid. Just remember to hit the save button. I'm just surprised that there's no auto saves. Oh my god, please. Please. Oh my... Oh my god. Throw it! Throw it, you coward! Throw it, you... Okay. I hate this guy, so just open the goddamn shortcut. Or give me fire, Bob, so I'll open it for you. Why? This game has never made this difficult before. Why are you being so difficult now, you piece of shit? Come on. Oh. Yeah, now. Do I have anything that I could use to light this thing on fire? I guess. Alright, you know what? Now, I was hoping that would cause a spark or something, no. Making my life a living hell. Yeah. I don't know if we have enough stuff for me to, like, try to clear some of these areas either, so I guess we're going back. Alright, in the meantime, do you have fire grease? I do not think we have any fire pine resin, no. Nope, you have nothing. Yeah, what I got is what I got on the consumables here. Alrighty. In that case, I'm just gonna have to keep on trying to get this guy to not frickin' run himself off. Because that's what you do when you develop a video game. You make sure that your method... Oh, come on. Hello? 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 Oh my god. There we go. You make sure that your method of being able to make it so that way you can actually run around and stuff doesn't work. It's like, yeah, let's just open the shortcut by having the guy throw a bomb at the wall. And then we'll make it where he'll fall off the wall, so therefore you can't throw the bomb at you, because he doesn't technically see you. Like, who came up with this retardation? Anyway, what in retardation? Speaking of, let's see how much I don't know about Elden Ring, huh? No, this is fine. Yeah, I literally just did this. Hello? Oh my god. Controller problem still. There we go. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on, it's not hard. Just recognize the controller. It's right there. There we go. Right? There we go. Wait, what? Whatever. It's gonna get rid of the music and stuff, which is the important thing. No, sorry. And the sound effects we should do too. Alright. And with that, we're gonna be listening to this video by Storm King, a smaller channel you guys suggested to me. The Nox are the missing link to Elden Ring's timeline. I don't know if I'd say the missing link, but I would definitely say they are a link in the chain for sure. Do a jumping attack if you have a great sword or a great hammer on these barrels. Let's see if I have one of those. If it doesn't work next time, I'll try that then. And you know what? If I die, whatever. At least it's open, and we'll be able to like grab the souls and everything right away. Which, speaking of, I can actually probably level up soon, so I should probably work on that too. Anyway, let us actually watch this here in the background.
Do you hear that? The sound of water. The river that flows in my home. The Eternal City.
Okay. That's from the
It's
cut of Simi
suffused
stuff, I
with
think?
the blessed wonders of the stars.
Why am I listening to Skyrim music?
The world of Elden Ring is as vast as it is ancient, and the veil of time has obscured much of its history.
Okay.
What we are left with is a world of ancient empires literally collapsing in on one another, filled with cryptic hints and environmental clues of what once was. In this first video
sure.
of the series, we are going to attempt to piece together the timeline of the lands between, spanning from the most ancient civilizations all the way to the modern day.
Okay.
Today, we will be covering an empire whose cultural fingerprint can be felt all across the lands between.
Body just
The
disappeared there.
Carians of Raya Lucaria, the Golden Order of Leyndell, and the Eternal Cities of the Underground.
Okay.
Once these three cultures were all one and the same, and
What?
the observation of the stars was synonymous with the worship of the Greater Will.
Okay.
This ancient empire's rise and fall shaped the modern era. The missing link was laying just under our feet this
God.
whole time.
Oh, cool. We're doing Thus Saith the Lord. Oh God. All right, so I am going to predict that the angle they're going for here is that the statues of the saints are part of a unified civilization that once existed on the lands between, and everything was all fine and dandy, but then some Nox betrayal happened against the Two Fingers or whatever, and it caused everything to split apart, and one of them ends up becoming the Carians, one of them ends up becoming Leyndell, and the other becomes the Eternal Cities. That's the sense I'm getting from this vid, so we'll see if that's what it actually delivers on. If so, we're not on a good start. Skyrim music is peak. That is true. That is true. It is, in fact, a good OST. I was not expecting the actual musical. Oh boy. I'm gonna get copyright struck just for this song being used here. See it now. Oh, I haven't actually rested. I thought I did. Oh, whoopsie. I was like, I didn't think I despawned everything already.
The fingers have willed it so.
Okay. The Fallen Empire of the Nox. All right. Sell it to me. What is the Fallen Empire of the Nox?
This topic will be split into two videos, just as the history of the Nox is.
Ah, damn it!
There's the
Getting
story
baited.
of an ancient empire, which spanned the entire continent and gave rise to the most prominent cultures in the lands between,
Okay.
but whose story is now only told through abandoned cathedrals, statues, and cryptic descriptions.
Abandoned, I suppose.
And there's the story of the modern Nox, who reside in the underground
Thought we
within
called
their
them
eternal
ancient.
cities, awaiting the age of the stars. These two periods are split by a cataclysm. The Nox betrayed the Greater Will and were subsequently banished under the earth, an event which almost certainly coincides with the arrival of the alien Estelles, living stars which haunt the
Oh,
underground,
no.
the destruction of the nameless Eternal City under Leyndell.
Oh no.
And so we reach our first discovery, the fact that the Nox's attack against the Greater Will and its vessels, evidenced by the Fingerslayer blade, is described as a betrayal, implies that the civilization they once were a part of was aligned with the Fingers.
Yes.
Fingerslayer blade itself is said to have been born of a corpse, and mirrors the design of the sacred relic greatsword, which itself is the corpse of Radagon. So, by this
America.
logic, the Fingerslayer blade was likewise born of the corpse of a god. In this world, a god is defined as a vessel, or potential vessel, for the Elden Ring. And so, from these descriptions, we can determine that
I would say potential vessel is more like an Empyrean. I feel like a god, whether or not that you are actually acting in your capacity as a vessel, once you become a god, clearly you have met some criteria or have been changed in some format that makes you 100% suitable to be a vessel for the Elden Ring, right? Like, I don't think we're dealing with a situation where it's like, you know, you have a god, you can have, like, say, Miquella becoming a god and something like that, and he can only potentially have the ring only because he doesn't have it. It's like, no, he could totally have the ring. It's just that, you know, like, that he has the capacity to do so, though the question would just be, does Miquella want to do that in the order, at least, that he's trying to create, or what he's imagining for, right? Or is it something more similar to, like, say, Ronnie or something like that, where he's trying to do something else? Anyway.
The hierarchy of this ancient civilization was likely much the same as the modern-day Golden Order, an order led by a female god, a vessel for the Elden Ring, and her lord consort.
Okay.
An order guided by the words of the fingers.
Okay.
This also explains why the modern Nox are stated to be attempting to create their own lord through their experiments with the mimic tears.
But that's a night lord.
Our
That's
next
a little
insight
different,
into the Nox comes from Celia, the town of sorcery. Gowry reveals an often overlooked insight with us after we help him by giving an unalloyed gold needle to Millicent.
You've been a saint through and through. As thanks, I vow to impart to you my knowledge of the lost sorceries of the Celians, descendants of the Eternal.
Oh, really?
This is further evidenced by the Nox swordstress and monk within Celia, as well as the empty version of the giant thrones we find within the underground Eternal Cities.
Okay.
This might seem
So
somewhat
far,
unimportant
on board.
at first, until we connect Celia to another character, primeval sorcerer Lusat,
Oh,
whose
okay.
staff we acquire after defeating the pair of Nox in Celia, and who Sorceress Selen explains.
Master Lusat is another founding Glintstone sorcerer. After his expulsion from the Academy, I heard that Master Lusat returned to his home.
I don't see the relevance
place
so
called
far, but
Celia
let's
in the
see where he
eastern
goes with
Caelid
this. Let's let him
wilds.
cook.
This is a huge detail, because Lusat is not just any mage, he is one of the founders of the practice of Glintstone sorcery itself. The eldest...
Okay, to clarify, in the Academy. Like, that's a very important little, qualification there.
Primeval sorcery, said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer, thought to be the founding Glintstone sorcery. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the star's amber rained down upon the land. Lusat was an astrologer, became one of the first Glintstone sorcerers, and is a descendant of the Eternal City. This is
Okay,
truly
no.
wild to
Okay, again.
Larger, more powerful.
Oh wait, I forgot. I gotta turn that off. 1 second. Anyway, okay. This is the first big mistake here. He's not one of the first Glintstone sorcerers. He's one of the first. He's one of the first quote unquote primeval current sorcerers. Now this isn't as obvious in the English text because I think they just shortened it to primeval sorcerers, so I can see where the confusion comes in. But the terminology being used is talking about specifically the primeval current, or I've talked about it, called it the original flow, because that's a more literal rendering of the terminology. Really, it refers to the headwaters of a river, right? And it's used in abstract senses, like it's kind of an idiomatic term in Japanese, where you use it when you're talking about the origin. Like there's some cases where it's not talking about the primeval current; it's actually just talking about like the source or the origin of something in the Japanese script, right? Like it's not that uncommon of a phrase to say, right? And the point is that terminology is just trying to say, oh, this is the source of the stars. Now, stars are the shooting stars are actually called flowing stars. That's the literal meaning, right? So we in English say shooting. In Japanese, you say flowing, like a river, right? We have the Milky Way, that great silver river in the sky. Again, the very fact that, Japanese, you refer to it as like the Silver River, again, evokes this idea with the Nox and Albinaurics and silver versus gold on Earth and all that stuff, right? Like, all of this is tied up in the language. And the point being made about Lusat and what's the other one named Azur is that they are both sorcerers who are trying to study this primeval current. But as far as we're aware, they have no connection to the old astrologers and stuff, right? Like they are later peoples who come together and they establish classes on that mountain with the Academy that are trying to understand the nature of Glintstone and by extension be able to uncover the secrets of the primeval current, right? They're trying to like use, they're trying to understand the stars so they can trace it back. And this goes back to the idea of wanting to become star childs and stuff, and this idea that we are dregs of the stars as Ymir goes through, right? So all that is tied up. So this is already becoming a big mistake because I can already see now we're working out the assumption that Lusad is somehow connected to this era and all that stuff. It's like, no, that's long after him. This is completely separate. So this is already a huge mistake, unfortunately.
Because this seemingly inconspicuous detail connects everything.
Oh boy.
Let me explain. Traveling.
And here's the thing: if that is true, if his entire theory is founded upon this premise that Lusad is connected to the founding reign of stars era, then this entire theory is bunk. there's no like everything up until now. It's like, okay, this is good in terms of like the actual like fact finding and the setup there. This is bad. And this is, I don't think this is salvageable, but let's see. What's the, where do we get,
to the
what do we get
Church
from
of
here?
Vows, we meet Muriel. He tells us of a ritual which was once performed in this ancient building.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Renala. The order of the Erdtree and the fate of the moon were conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven. This miracle blesses the Church to this day.
What's most interesting about this miracle is that it was performed at the statue of a Nox Night Maiden and uses celestial dew, which is a hidden tear found in the Eternal City, also known as a night tear. Once upon a time, the stars of the night sky guided fate, and this is a recollection of those times. It is notable that both Radagon and Renala understood and respected the significance of a ritual of the Eternal City. We will return to this church soon enough.
Alright.
It is also important to note other cultural similarities.
The reason that Renala and Marika are both respecting this is that one, Marika is connected to, Marika's a Newman, right? She has close, quote unquote, again, the localization goes to the idea that she has close ties essentially with the Nox. Really, what it's saying is like she's just close and it really only requires like a kind of affinity in the abstract sense, right? So, she feels like, a kindred spirit with Nox, right? Because again, they're both Newman. It's very obvious that that's the intent and stuff. It's very clear looking at the text, right? People, again, when we watched like videos a while back on the conspiracy side trying to think, America's behind the Night of the Black Knives, all that, it's like, no, this is completely misunderstanding the information they're trying to go for it. It's trying to help you connect to understand that Marika and the Nox are both Newman at the end of the day, right? Like this is, because they kind of like, they don't necessarily get to that directly when it comes to the Nox and stuff, right? Like they kind of just allude to it. And that's sort of the point. Anyway, the reason why that Karya and Marika are both doing that is one, Karyans have a close connection to the Nox. They've had a close connection to Nox Stella, as I go over my Karya thesis, for basically since they established themselves up on the Moonlight Altar. The actual like reason for Marika being involved in that is that Karyans want it, and Marika's okay with it because she's also Newman, right? It's not like she's like, oh no, I'm really gunning for it. We have to have the mares this way. It's like she just doesn't seem like she's opposed to it. Why would she be? Like this is fine. Both parties in this sort of peace agreement / marriage ceremony, right, can basically kind of agree on this one aspect of let's wipe it away using like the fate of the stars or whatever. And then the only question is the Nox's cooperation, which hey, apparently again we know that Marika has made relations with the Nox in the Nameless Eternal Cities. You can argue the exact nature of that relationship, but it certainly exists. So I would say, just going by what we have there isn't really anything more that you can really look into to be like, oh no, there's like some really strange like eyebrows that need to be raised on this one incident. No, everything seems pretty conventional when you understand the histories of the two cultures here. But let's see where he's going to go with this, because he said he wants to return to it later. So what's he going to say about the Academy now?
Between the Carians and the Nox.
Okay.
First of all, the practice of turning humans into puppets is exclusively practiced by Celibus, a Carian preceptor, and Pydia, a Carian servant. The sole
they're one and the
exception to this rule can be found within the Eternal City, an old puppet crafted in the Eternal City. These sisters, members of a cold-blooded race who wield flowing weapons, became puppets of their own volition. Additionally, Celibus uses starlight shards to craft the potions used to create these puppets, which are described as a prized item that was once used in the Eternal City as an ingredient in intoxicating draughts. These shards are also closely linked to
Again, this goes back to them having a close connection with Noxella. Well, yes, of course, they're gonna be able to pick up some of these things like puppetry and stuff. But that much is very much clear. Also, I kind of love how he kind of alludes to Selvus and Pydia. I don't know where his stance is on this, but again, I've said it before, they're obviously the same person. It's obvious that Selvus is just Pydia's puppet. Sorry, Swotown. I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that one. I think you did a terrible job on that vid.
fate.
Anyway, moving on.
Probably how they are used to create puppets at all. Aside from these direct textual links, there's also a wide range of cultural similarities between these two groups. The most obvious being the study of the stars. The Nox went so far as to create a false night sky underground, such was the importance of the stars to their culture. The Carians are also a matriarchal society led by Queen Renala, just as the Nox are, with the Night Maidens holding the highest clerical rank. Finally, Renala uses the larval tears for rebirth, which is the core of a creature of mimicry known as a silver tear, as much a substance as it is a living organism. This material is required by the amber egg cradled by Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, to birth people anew.
Sure.
It should be clear from these commonalities that the Carians and the Nox trace their lineages back to the same civilization. And this civilization either included, or was comprised of, the ancient astrologers. So, with that established, and before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dig deeper into characterizing this ancient empire.
Oh no.
What structures and ruins can we attribute to them? And when did the fall of this civilization occur?
What? How did that?
How does this link to Queen Marika and the Golden Order? To answer these questions, we must first return to the Church of Vows. Based on the central Nox statue, this church will be our first...
I'm pausing a lot today. Okay, so, big problem here. The presumption that, okay, well, there's a lot of connections between Caria and Noxella. They have some overlap in some of the practice and stuff they're doing. It ignores the fundamental reality that Caria is a people that are all about sorcery and the study of sorcery. So, of course, they're going to go and ask ancient sorcerers and try to learn from ancient sorcerers. Like, this isn't anything conspiratorial here. Now, if we were talking about Celia, I can understand that, right? Because we have a right to talk about, Descents of the Eternal City, right? You could make this type of claim, like with Celia, but with Caria, again, there's so much more fundamental history that isn't being talked about here. Like, we haven't even gotten through or established anything involving with Lascar or with the Academy or all that stuff. It just sort of is this presumption that, you just have Caria here, and Caria is like here on Liurnia, and it goes back to this ancient civilization. It's like, no, Caria is relatively recent. Pretty clear that they come from the mountaintops. Like, this is a bit overboard here. So I think this is a reach in terms of what you're trying to derive from the evidence. The conclusion would be simply that, okay, there are connections between the Nox and the Carians, and when you look into it, especially the stuff with Moonlight Altar and stuff, it becomes very clear that, okay, they have some sort of trade relation. That goes back to the statues that we're talking about there. But I think I know where those statues are going to come back into the picture here. We'll see now.
In addition to the list of potential ancient empire ruins. The architectural style of this building is extremely unique and is only found in one other place in the lands between, and another within the Shadowlands.
Okay.
In the ruins of the grand cathedrals of Manus Celis and Manus Matir, which translate to the Church of the Hand and the Church of the Mother, respectively.
Manus Celis doesn't translate to the Church of the Hand, to my, or at least not just Church of the Hand. Like, the Manus part, yes. But I think, if I recall correctly, the Celis part, there's been some debate over how exactly to translate that, but that should be something akin to, Hand of the Sky, or Hand of the Heavens, something like that, or the Heavenly Hand, which I think works fine when you're trying to describe the fingers, right? Like, what better way to describe them except a heavenly hand? And then having the other one with Metis. Meter, of course, with this idea that it translates back to, the hand of the mother hand. Sure, that works as well. Now, again, how much we're supposed to take, like, were they actually intended to be translated this way and stuff? Like, I feel like maybe it's supposed to be the name of the hands of the fingers, perhaps, because Meter is used, and obviously we have the actual Meter, but, like, I don't know, what if, like, for example, is that Meter's actual name, or is that the name that was given to her by, like, Ymir or something? That part, I don't know, and I have no idea where to put on there. Though I've talked about this before in my analysis, I would argue that this cathedral and stuff, it has existed before there was any connection with the fingers. I would very happily argue, but we'll see where he wants to go with this now.
And damn, are these buildings important.
Okay.
There is no descriptions which explain their purpose. We can extrapolate their importance simply based on the locations and names. Manus Celis is located on the Moonview Plateau, the only location in the world where a second moon can be observed. The only way to reach this ethereal location is, of course, through the underground, up through the same type of well we use to reach the Eternal Cities. Based on this location's importance to Ranni's questline, I have always believed this second moon was her dark moon. But there are
Okay.
other possibilities to account for. It could
Okay.
also be the second moon encountered by Renala and her sister, R'hllana. Finally, there is the Moon of Nokstella, depicted in a talisman of the same name. This legendary talisman is the treasure of Nokstella.
I've talked about this before. This is legendary like the moon depicted on this talisman is probably supposed to just be a extremely large glintstone crystal that was found where we find the throne with the Dragonkin soldier boss fight, right? I don't think you should think of it as like an actual traditional moon in that sense. Now you could argue maybe it has like the same powers of a moon or what have you, right? But again, it's underground. There's no sky down there, right? It's not like you just have you have all these fake glintstone and stuff, and then whoa, magical moon just pops up. I don't think anything like that is happening here. I feel like the Ranni Dark Moon thing is perhaps the safest bet there. I wouldn't want to go with twin moon stuff again, unless the idea is that the Dark Moon and the full moon are what comprise the twin moon, but then there's nothing cold related with R'hllana's twin moon, so I'd be a little hesitant on that. I'd be more willing to believe that either it's like a different either it's like some sort of like duplicate of the moon or some sort of like sister moon that it existed or whatever, right? Though again, I would always have questions about why Renala focused on just her full moon and not the both moons like R'hllana does. Like there are definitely questions I have about like sort of how the magical stuff plays out, but that can go into the question of like, you know, to what extent the moons and everything are involved with the sisters and their fates and their decisions and all that jazz.
Eternal City. This talisman represents the lost black moon. The Moon of Nokstella was a guide to countless stars. This moon is also the source of the memory stones found in the Sorcerer's Rises throughout the world, which likewise increase your attunement slots. A black, lightly beguiling stone, prized by the sorcerers who produced them, said to be a fragment of the black moon that once hung above the Eternal City. I propose this moon is all three. Ranni uses the dark moon to bring about the Age of Stars, and the Nox are said to be awaiting the Age of Stars. So it would make sense that these two moons are one and the same, lost to time with the fall of the Nox, only to be rediscovered by the Carians. This interpretation certainly is more refined than trying to account for 4 separate moons in the game. Returning to Manus Celis and the Moonview Ruins, the name of this cathedral is also extremely important.
I think there is a
Celis,
fair
which
case to be made that maybe having too many moons would be a problem, but I would disagree with trying to simplify it that much.
This church also houses Ranni's 2 fingers, making the name's meaning quite literal. Again, we reaffirm that this ancient empire worshipped the 2 fingers, and by extension, the Greater Will. Its twin cathedral...
Again, I would not say that you've established this idea of an ancient empire from here, right? Like, there's sort of the preposition of, don't worry, I'll get to it, I'll have it all together. But just look at this, I'm like, oh, it has unique architecture. It's pretty much in a very similar style to what we see, though, from, like, Caria Manor and stuff. Like, it doesn't look like something that crazy. Now, maybe you could argue it's also similar to something like with the Nox or whatever. Maybe you want to make that case and that argument there, and then, therefore, try to connect it. But, like, that's me doing the work for you now, bruh. And, like... I'd like it if you were kind of the one to kind of like try to set all the groundwork for this. Like the only connection I can see is like, oh, they got the saint statues, and you're trying to obviously connect the saint statues to this unified empire. Which, hey, you know, I can totally believe there was an ancient empire which had this this statue as like its centerpiece or whatever of this, you know, hooded man with a sword, and somehow he's like this holy figure of some sort, right? And he's just sort of been adopted by subsequent countries and things that came afterward. But I would argue, I think it's just that, an icon that has been adopted by various cultures after the fact. And I don't know what country, culture, or empire I would specifically connect to it, especially considering we don't really see that in, say, you know, the one you think would be the most important in this case, which would be the Farum Azula, right? Like, Farum Azula is like the original Greater Will, 2 fingers worshipping, Elden Ring having civilization here. So, like, where's the statue in their neck of the woods here, right? Like, shouldn't that be the one? Or are we talking about there's now another civilization that somehow came after them, and that's where the Nox are coming from? Because, again, my perspective would be, I'd say the Nox come from the Newman, who are get involved along with Plaki's god at the beginning of Farum Azula's beginnings. Imagine having a moon underground, crazy. Again, I'm not opposed to the idea, like, intrinsically. Like, I'm like, okay, you know, weirder things have happened in Elden Ring. I just don't think that's the case based on what we know.
Makes this even more clear. Manus Meteor is quite literally built atop the finger ruins of the mother of all two fingers.
Yes, that much is true.
Shares her name. The people who built these two ancient cathedrals were obviously aware of the deepest secrets of the world. It is no wonder why Count Ymir, a sorcerer who has seen beyond the division of stars and...
Again, I do not appreciate this idea, like, oh, they're ancient cathedrals. Why? Because they have allegedly unique architectural assets, which again, I'd say are a little too similar to stuff we already see in Liurnia and Caria in general. And then, like, on top of that, you also have, like, tied into there, just the fact that, well, Metis Meter is clearly owned, used, and occupied by Carians, and it has the Carian, or the Liurnian trees that we see in, like, the lakes and stuff like that. So it's like, are we really trying to claim now that this is, like, an ancient cathedral versus a cathedral which either deliberately or accidentally was built atop of the finger ruins of Metis Meter, right? Like, and that goes into the questions of, okay, well, why are the Meter ruins underground, but the other two finger ruins aren't, right? Like, there's a lot of questions to be asked about the finger ruins themselves, but, like, again, there's a lot of presuppositions going into this, and I don't feel it's been well established.
gods takes up residence in the ruins of a civilization which embodied the same principle. The Church of Vows, Manus Celis, and Manus Meteor are all remnants of this ancient civilization.
Oh boy. Ah!
How can we determine what else is? Taking a closer look at all three of these structures, we can observe many of this one specific statue.
Church of Vows is especially
weird. In the Church of Vows, it is depicted holding a torch, but in the other cathedrals, this figure instead carries a sword. You may recognize him as the Saint if you are a fan of Tarnished Archaeologist, but in my circles, we refer to him as Eldon Charlie. Once you start looking, you will find a multitude of...
Okay. I mean, I guess you have to have a joke thrown in here for something that's, pretty by the books of reading descriptions and stuff. Okay, I can dig it, but, he is just called the Saint. Like whatever you think of Tarnished Archaeologist analysis, like, it's called Saint's Bridge. It's referring to the Saint statues, like, right? Like, I refer to the statues of this figure with a book as sage statues because there's an obvious distinction between, okay, you got the guy with the sword and he's the saint, and then you got this guy but with a book instead to associate with knowledge. So instead of a holy man, we'll call him a wise man. So, okay, well, he, got the saint and the sage, right? Like, I like, okay. Like, what is the whatever we want to call them or whatever, like, what's the importance? Like, where are we getting at here? Because, all right, you see the statues with the torches there. Well, yeah, what if Caria just adopts that icon for whatever reason, right? Adopts this icon and then builds the Church of Vows itself, right? Like, what if the Church of Vows isn't this ancient church? What if it's actually just a recent church? What if we say the same with the Church of the Manus Celis, right? And then again, the same with Manus Meter. Like, again, this goes back. I'm going to keep going back to this. What is the basis for saying that they are ancient, other than the fact that they have this statue icon, right? And the fact that the churches themselves are, unique in terms of architecture. Because there's lots of unique architecture that isn't necessarily ancient. And let's be honest, some of the unique architecture is then used generically, like, say, with ruins and things like that. So, like, I really feel like this is just dragging this entire idea down.
Structures adorned with this statue. Most prominently, they can be found on the Divine Bridges, leading to the even older Divine Towers.
Okay.
They can also be found alongside other discarded statues in the basement of Stormvale Castle, on the bridges surrounding Leyndell, and most...
There's also the statue. I think there's also these statues on the bridge outside Stormvale, if not also Saint's Bridge. There's also the same statues at the Colosseum in Stormhill, which again would be connected to Godfrey. So are we going to now say that the Colosseums are also part of this ancient civilization, like with Godfrey and stuff now? Like, again, this is the problem I'm having, is where we're using this icon to be like, this indicates that this thing is ancient. And I'm like, no, from what I would see independently, just looking at the civilizations themselves, they all look like they come from different times, and the adoption of the statue is incidental. Maybe it has some symbolic thing that goes back to a really ancient thing in the lands between, and it just becomes sort of like, it's like how we say, I feel it in my gut. That goes back to like Mesopotamian and ancient Egyptian times, right? Like that idea of like, the gut being like, the source of the soul and stuff like that, right? Like, and we sort of adopted that as like idiomatic phrases and things going into the modern day, just as like, incidental of language, right? But it's ancient technically, but it's been used throughout like basically all of human history, right? It's not like unique to that. And the same thing could be said for here. Sure, maybe there is some ancient civilization that first adopted this statue, and this statue is actually very telling about that civilization. I'm totally willing to buy that. But that doesn't now mean that every instance of this statue means that it is part of this ancient civilization and not something that later civilizations have co-opted for one reason or another. Probably because it's cool. Let's be honest, it's a pretty cool, image.
Interestingly, within the Eternal City of Nokstella, standing guard over an elevator which takes you to the Lake of Rot. To drive home their connection to the Eternal Cities, the walking mausoleums which have Eternal City architecture, a fact which is most clear when observing the mausoleum roaming the nameless Eternal City, also contain this statue within. Returning to the Divine Bridges specifically, it is also relevant that the largest of these bridges...
So is the argument now that the mausoleums are also ancient, or are we now acknowledging that you could have more recent stuff that can be, quote-unquote, made or modeled after, say, something even Noxian, not even necessarily just these statues, and it's not necessarily connected to anything, right? Like, again, I find a lot of this kind of like, wishy-washy on like trying to clarify what the underlying argument is here. Again, we see these on the divine, the bridges to the divine towers. Okay, fair. We see these on some of the different civilizations or areas under control now of different civilizations. Okay, fair. So now we're supposed to extrapolate that they're all part of this ancient empire now? That's where my hang-up is.
Is the only connection to the mountaintops of the giants, and to the consecrated snowfield, both of which are deeply connected to the story of the astrologers and the Nox.
Okay.
While all of the divine bridges are impressive, this one really cements how powerful this empire must have been. This central lift building alone is larger than some villages. Just to really cement this connection between the divine bridges and the Carians, in addition to Elden Charlie, some of these bridges also contain this statue, which holds an open book. This statue also adorns the Carian study hall, which itself is the only connection to the divine bridge of Liurnia. The way these cultures overlap with such consistency makes it clear this connection is intentional. These statues are one of our best indicators for where the boundaries of this empire reach to. For where Leyndell stands today, the Eternal City once existed in its place. Now, there is some overlap with this theory and Nameless Singer's Gold Road video,
Alright, I've
and
not
with
heard
some
of
of
this.
the Tarnished Archaeologist content. These are great creators, but I have a few key disagreements with their theories.
Okay.
Firstly, the idea that Leyndell and the walls that surround it were themselves built long before the Golden Order.
Okay.
And on this point, I strongly disagree. Firstly, this would mean that America's Golden Order in its long history essentially built nothing, and their contributions amounted to essentially painting a bunch of existing buildings gold. There's also nothing that really suggests that these structures are that old. They are clearly built to include depictions of the Erd Tree, and it takes more mental gymnastics to claim that these were somehow added later than just accepting it was built by the Golden Order.
I would agree
I'm
with
happy to
that.
debate
Sure.
this in the comments, though. On the Tarnished Archaeologist side of things, he makes an interesting observation in this video.
God,
The
I hate
main
you so
gate of
much.
Leyndell doesn't actually lead anywhere. Instead, on the other side is just a large body of water, which really doesn't make sense. Why have a main gate that leads to nowhere? He also points out that in the story trailer, Godric's forces are attacking this gate, and doing so only really makes sense.
Well, let's just go to the fundamental point. Like, why are we trying to like dance around the issue? The obvious case is like, okay, clearly something collapsed and wasn't supposed to go here, right? Like, I don't think you need that much. Like, it's weird that this is the thing where it's like, no, we need to really establish the foundation that the entire front half of Leyndell wasn't always just a giant water sink here. It's like, okay, yeah, I can get behind that. Like, is there anyone thinking that you have a giant city and like half of it was just made with water? I'm curious. Like, you have two gates that lead into this giant water pit. Like, I feel like we don't need to go this deep to explain, but
If,
okay.
At this point, it was still connected
This
to
is a
the
little
rest
bit of
of the city.
quibble.
Now, these are great observations. What I have issue with is his explanation.
Okay.
He theorized that the missing part of Leyndell was where the nameless Eternal City once stood, and that its collapse is what left this chasm.
I would disagree. I remember the exact video that TA did for this, and yeah, I think again, everyone knows that I say it all the time. I think TA picked with his first vid. After that, it's the theories and the analysis have all been incredibly mixed at best. I just don't think a lot of the content is that good. Again, I think one of my community members summed it up great. Great history, terrible lore. That's TA's channel in a nutshell. I am curious though what the argument is, because if you want to believe that there's an ancient civilization Langdell comes from, it is the idea then that the nameless eternal cities behind Langdell's foundation or something else. What video are we watching? We are watching, again, for those who want to check it out yourself, I will try add a link to the description after the stream. This is by Storm King. Can you guys actually see this? No, you can. Ah, damn, of course, you can just not. So the name of the channel is Storm King. If you like this video and stuff, feel free to give him a like and a sub right here. This is called The Nox Are the Missing Link to Elden Ring's Timeline. So I guess we're going to have to see about that, huh? Obviously, it's just the same flooding system as the Shadow Keep. Yeah, they just flooded it. Just brought in some water or something. You know, they had a terrible fire. Honestly, that's actually more believable than it's more believable than the alternatives. All right, so let's get back to this.
This seems like a cool answer at first. It seems to fit so well and be an excellent example.
No, it sounds like absolute poppycock. It sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna try to claim like, oh, this is a really cool, great idea. No, it sounds ridiculous from the outset, especially when you not just look at Langdell, but also look at his arguments for Noxtella, where it's like, ah, yes, Noxtella physically sank all the way down underground, and somehow the land above ground is two different completely elevations, like this giant sheer cliff between them. But he's like, no, look, see, it would perfectly fit in here. Yeah, you look through a bird's eye view and ignore your z-axis. Yeah, so like, no, this is it's not good. It's not good. It's silly.
Example of environmental storytelling. But just stop and think about this for a second. This would imply that the Eternal City was above ground until well after the Shattering. I hope this video has been able to convince you that the fall of the Nox happened ages before Marika.
Well, after the Shattering. I agree, this would be a problem. Just like fundamentally, this idea that, oh, up until the Shattering, there was apparently something with which all the soldiers of, again, they're assaulting the capital, and Godric's supposed to be on the inside and run away from the capital from this moment. Like, the idea that they don't know that the front gate is, you know, like a dead end. Like, yeah, that's, of course, that's a huge problem. And again, there's a huge problem with all of this. Again, he mentions earlier the idea of the Estelles and stuff being connected to the betrayal and stuff. I've talked about this before. No, the Nameless Eternal City clearly was the Nameless Eternal City and was alive and well, seemingly well until past Godwyn's burial. And then probably after Marika shattered the Elden Ring and everything during that period, and, you know, when we're, like, getting, you know, in the lead up to the Shattering is probably when the stuff with Estelle and the Nox and things happen. Now, you could argue then, what happened to the rest of Langdell City on the front half and stuff like that, and does that connect to the Nameless Eternal City or the destruction caused by Estelle? I don't know, maybe. I haven't thought about that one too hard myself in terms of like getting more you know, specific on the timeline, because then we could obviously date it to after the Second Defense of Langdell, most likely. But in terms of like just like the generalities and stuff, it's like, yeah, the Nameless Eternal City's been around for a while. So again, I'm curious where he's gonna go with this. Is he gonna try to argue the Nameless Eternal City fell and collapsed really early then, and it wasn't concurrent with Langdell, despite all indications otherwise? I'm very, very curious where we're going here. I'm very confused, to be fair, watching this. Well, I'm here to give some context and stuff. So again, hopefully as I'm referencing, because again, I haven't seen all the videos he's referencing here for the theories and stuff, but I will just say, I just think the underlying premise is a bit ridiculous to TA's argument. I would definitely agree with this, that yeah, clearly, the Second Defense of Langdell should already, like, completely discredit this entire notion.
His rise to godhood, let alone the shattering of the Elden Ring. This is the danger of analyzing environmental storytelling first, then making the lore fit around it. It is much easier to reason that either there used to be a bridge over this area which connected to the rest of the city, which was destroyed by Morgott to block the advance of the invading armies, or that he flooded part of the city for the same purpose.
Well, there's other reasons. Like we said earlier, there could have been actual fire. Again, you see all the ash around here. Now, I know TA would try to date this, like, to, like, probably Glowmite Queen times or something, but the idea that they haven't cleaned their chimneys ever since the Glowmite Queen is, you know, another absurdity that TA just sort of says without any, any pushback on it, of his own. But, like, the entire idea that, like, that there's just no city there. I struggle to imagine that. Like, maybe, like, if you really want to push it, maybe there could have just been a bridge. But I think the easier explanation would be, no, there used to be more of the city, and then sometime between the Second Defense in Leyndell and the modern day, something happened that caused that city to collapse or disappear, like warp into another dimension, like whatever, whatever off the wall idea you might have for it, I bet it was the commoner / market districts that were flooded or something. Maybe that's why there's so many commoners dead at the perfumer's place. I mean, I don't know about that being the explanation, because you could always make the case that the conscripted commoners are just that, conscripted commoners, right? Like, that they are, or conscripted citizens at the very least, right? Like, I think they would use more nobles than if they want to show that, though, right? So, like, sure, maybe it's like the commoner district. I could totally believe that, and like all that got lost and stuff. But again, I don't think the fact that there's corpses there would be the explanation. I think the explanation would be that Morgoth has conscripted most of the citizens of the city into the army and has them protecting, at or near the walls, right? Because that most of that area where we see them is at that farm colonist home that's connected directly into the rampart. So I don't think there's anything like, too deep about like what's going on with those commoners. But yeah, I would agree with you. It would be an explanation where if you want to argue, like, say, the upper quarter with the golden homes belongs to like the upper crust folk, the nobles, those living closer to the cathedral and the palace and all that, then yeah, it would make sense that the other side of that would be the commoner district and the places where all the markets and, all the things that, for the daily, day-to-day living of Leyndell would actually be, you could argue, the actual like productive side of Leyndell. Again, no offense to the nobles, like God be it for me to like give elite folks a hard time, but like for all the people that actually do their do all the hard labor, so that way they have some good plumbing. I think it would make sense that that would be the side of the city it was in, right? Again, there's. I'm not even sure where we're going here with this. So I'm hoping that this is really going to tie back into the theory really well. So let's finish this up and let him let him continue.
Again, no hate to either of these creators. I just believe it's good to have a healthy debate here.
That's good.
So, what am I proposing instead?
Okay, what's the alternative?
Based on the evidence we have, I believe that there was once a single, centrally located Eternal City.
Okay.
Likely the same one that now exists in ruins under Leyndell.
Okay.
Within the Deeproot Depths. This was the seat of power for this empire, which we will refer to as the Eternal Empire from this point on.
Alright.
When Sellians are described as descendants of the Eternal, I believe this means the town of Sellia was also once a part of this ancient...
I don't remember if the Japanese clarified this as Eternal City specifically or not. But I do recall, I think, a description or something that does allude to this the same way. And I'm gonna want to look on that, because I don't want to poo-poo hit what he's saying here without actually having the facts in front of me. But like, yeah, that's really hinging on the idea that, oh, okay, it's talking about the Eternal, but it's something separate from the Eternal City. Oh, like, oh, I think that's really like kind of reaching there. When it's like, okay, Descents of the Eternal, you have Noxes from the Eternal City there. You even established earlier about the thrones and stuff like that. Again, going back to the whole America, and again, that's if you connect the Black Knife Assassins to Sellia, but the connection between, America and the Newman and the Nox and all that stuff, like, I don't know.
Empire. The fact that Lusat was one of the founders of Glintstone sorcery
there it is!
Extremely old. Older even than the advent of Glintstone.
And there it is, and that's okay. So now I see why. So this is where the game is being given away. Because Lusat has been now presumed as this really ancient person, this entire video has been operating under the assumption that therefore anything involving Sellia must also be as ancient as the founding reign of stars, and thus the beginning of Glintstone and all that stuff. Again, as I said earlier, that's ridiculous. Like, that's not it whatsoever. It becomes very clear that, yeah, Lusat is not that old. You could say maybe he's even, older than you'd expect, but he's not that old. So, yeah, and then that's gonna now, yeah. I think that's gonna be such, yeah, I think that like I said, he hinged everything on Lusat, like he said, and that's the downfall to this theory, unfortunately.
Likewise, we can also put the town of Ordina in this category as well.
Okay.
Not only does it have the exact same architecture as Sellia, being its sister town, It is also home to multiple black knives, which are described as scions, or descendants of the Eternal, the same way the Sellians are.
I would not use that as a justification, because you could always... Again, I've said it before, I think Ordina is just... Again, Sellia, Ordina, the lower quarter of Leyndell, I think all three of these are Nox settlements above ground, right? In the same way that we have the ancient dynasties who are mostly underground, but then they have like the old ruins in Liurnia above ground. I would say the same thing with the Nox here. You know, the Nox, they worked with astrologers, established Sellia. The lower quarter, you have seemingly going back to the times of the fortified manor and the farm colonies, but you essentially have a bunch of Nox and stuff who settle in and convert to Mariko, worship in Leyndell from the Nameless Eternal City, and then you have Nameless Eternal City Nox who also seem to team up with the astrologers from the village on the mountaintops and establish another town at the end of the freezing river and things like that. So all of that definitely seems to be the case. But again, now we're trying to say, oh, Sellia is part of this ancient civilization. So actually also Ordina is part of that too. Well, what are you going to say about the Leyndell lower quarter now? I'm very curious. Very curious, so.
As it stands, these two towns have clear textual and environmental evidence relating them to the Nox. The one other example of this architectural style is found within the lowest section of Leyndell, and this and only this portion of the city is probably what was left of the collapsed Eternal City below ground.
Oh no.
Leyndell was built around what was left.
Well, okay, here's a problem. That architecture is inconsistent with the actual Eternal Cities. This is the only part that's left of the old Eternal City. Looks nothing like the old Eternal City. Like, come on. Come on! Like, this is why I talk about it. Okay, you have a mixture of humans and Nox who come together and they have their own architectural style here. Okay, that's fair. Now we're trying to say that, okay, well, Sellia is this really ancient town. It's not. Therefore, Ordina is this very ancient town. It's not. And therefore, this lower quarter is also this very ancient town. It's not. That was the last remaining part of this ancient city, which collapsed below. Like, no, the Nameless Eternal City below is in ruins, not because it collapsed from above ground. It was established underground, as are all the Eternal Cities, quite clearly just looking at their architecture. Now, something he said earlier was this idea of looking at the environmental storytelling and then comporting the lore around that. I disagree. Environmental storytelling is part of the lore. You cannot ignore that as a facet of the lore. The problem is trying to twist the environmental storytelling to suit your own presuppositions without looking at other factors, including the text and including the psychology of the characters. Again, those are my three big pillars, right? You have the environment, you have the script, and you have the actual underlying character psychology. You need to have all three working in tandem to really get a sense there, because that's what the developers are trying to convey. A rational world, which you can see some expression of in, of course, the open world, but is otherwise supplemented by text in order to help shape the way that you're viewing that open world. In order to make all three of these work, you need to look at all of them, not just one. And this is where I see the failure is. His issue isn't that... The TA's issue wasn't that he wasn't looking at the environmental storytelling there. The problem was that TA was just doing bad analysis. That's been really the issue, is that the analysis is just faulty. It's bad. The methodology does not work, and the assumptions are kind of ridiculous oftentimes. They don't sound logical when you put them under scrutiny. The issue here is that the script hasn't been obeyed properly. Because again, Lusat isn't just this really ancient sorcerer who founded, comes from the era of the founding Reign of Stars as one of the first Glintstone sorcerers. He's just one of the founding primeval sorcerers for the Academy. This is like a completely separate thing. Again, primeval referring to the primeval current. Again, that's the more accurate term for the JP here. Because again, these are sorcerers who are trying to study and understand the nature of the primeval current and how to get to there, which, as we now know, the primeval current is the greater will. So, again, this is where this is becoming quite the bonfire, let's say, like kind of burning out of control here. All right. We're almost done with this. Let's listen.
Left of the previous empire. One only needs to look at the bridge to Leyndell, which is one of the two locations within the city that contains Eldon Charlie statues, to see that this architecture looks very distinct from the walls it connects to. Leyndell was built around the ruins of these divine bridges, and integrated them into the city, just as they did the red-roofed buildings. As we previously discussed, the two cathedrals, Manus Meteor and Manus Celis, were also part of the Empire, along with the Church of Vows. Through our investigation into Eldad Charlie,
Oh my
we can
God.
also tentatively claim that the Divine Bridges, Stormvale Castle, and much of the road system across the lands between also originally existed within the Empire. This really paints the picture that the Eternal Empire truly spanned the entire continent.
All right, what about the Colosseum? Again, he's talking about that. He's not mentioning the Colosseum. This is a problem here, right? He wants to make the argument that, oh no, all these statues are indicative of being part of this really ancient civilization and stuff, but he's leaving out one of the biggest outliers that would readily disprove that this can be the only assumption. Like, this cannot be the automatic assumption if you're trying to make the argument that the Colosseums expressly, related, built, and closed down because of the era of Godfrey are erecting these statues, and yet are somehow different from any of these other examples that have been provided. And this is my big problem. The only statues which I think you could reliably argue are part of a civilization which predates any of these peoples are the statues that you find out in the open world, and I guess the one in Stormvale, which is also kind of in ruins and buried, right? Like, because that seems to have been like same idea as the one we find outside of Stormvale on Stormhill, right? Those are the only cases where I'm like, okay, these saint statues, there's something there. You can actually make an argument that there is a old civilization which all of its ruins and anything about it has been buried or lost to time or, disintegrated in the winds with erosion or whatever, right? But some of these statues have remained, and they remain as half buried or whatever, and they're made of the what do you call it? The smithing stone and stuff like that. So maybe you could try to read more into that, right? Because you have some of them that are made with like gold smithing stone, but I would argue that's just because of exposure to the Erd tree and stuff turned the smithing stone gold, like we see with the rest of the smithing stone. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, this is
Continent.
This is sad. This is sad.
Orthena marking the northmost tip of the landmass, Sellia the south, and the two cathedrals to the east and west. We can learn more than just where this empire was located, however. We can also glean what its belief system was, and what other groups can be attributed to it.
Okay.
First of all, in contrast to the modern day, where the Golden Order worships the greater will and the
I'm
two
gonna try
fingers,
staring at it, see if that's the problem.
Carians seek guidance from the stars.
There.
The Eternal Empire viewed them as one and the same.
All right, the problem was I was
cathedrals
looking
both
at the
hide
guy.
a set of fingers,
For some reason,
or,
the explosion
in the
doesn't
case
work
of
if you don't look
Manus
at
Mater,
it.
The Finger Mother herself, under the main structure. Yet Manus Celis is also adorned with the stone astrolobes of the astrologers, and is littered with shards of starlight. This is clearly a place of celestial...
I was admittedly a little distracted there, so let's give this guy his credit and try to listen to this.
There
we go.
And the Carians seek guidance from the stars. The Eternal Empire viewed them as one and the same.
No.
Their cathedrals both hide a set of fingers, or, in the case of Manus Mater, the Finger Mother herself.
Again, they aren't ancient, so I would say that this is, again, is attributing way too much to not ancient churches.
The stone astrolobes of the astrologers, and is littered with shards of starlight. This is clearly a place of celestial observation and greater will worship. The Eternal Empire recognized that Mater herself was a star.
Again, if you want to make the case for the Church of Manus Celis, I would be okay with that, but you'd have to acknowledge that it's within the context of how do I put this? It's within the context of, the whole Liurnian Wars coming together in peace, and the overall culture under Godfrey that we see on Moonlight Altar sort of infecting the moon people that live on that plateau there. So like, I saying this idea that, okay, now we know that there's this civilization that worship both the stars and the greater will and the two fingers and all that. I'm like, maybe I'm willing to believe that if the Nox or ancestors to the Nox are involved whatsoever. But like, I don't think this is the hill to die on for it.
Celestial power are one and the same, but that fact has been largely lost to time.
Maybe despised it when you were looking at him. I maybe.
Scholars and the highest priests.
Apparently.
This ancient civilization was an empire of astrologers, the same astrologers who at one point allied themselves with the fire giants, and who would go on to glimpse the primeval current and bring down a rain of stars, marking the origin of glintstone sorcery.
Yeah, again, I can't really say much more than this, and otherwise to say the foundations for this are rotten, so everything derived from this is absolutely bunk.
So highly indicates that the ancient empire ended before glintstone was discovered in the mountaintops, helping us to begin to build a timeline. The astrologers are an ancient group which trace their lineage all the way back to Ra, and then through the entire period of the Ancient Empire, even surviving its fall, and eventually going on to discover glintstone sorcery, found the House of Caria.
Do I think that Rao has a connection either to this quote-unquote ancient civilization or to the Nox and the Eternal Cities, and therefore leads to this? I think you can maybe make a case for the Eternal Cities. I would hesitate, though, because I feel like the fact that Placky's god, at least now with what we know from the DLC, seems to be once again unaccounted for. I think there's a bigger case of just arguing a Far Missoula connection. Like, really? Like, honestly, I feel like that might be good there. And again, Far Missoula hasn't come up in this as much as I think so, because again, it would completely discredit this this notion. But he also says there's a part 2. So maybe that's where he's going to trying to talk about how this ancient civilization formed, and maybe that's where Far Missoula is going to come in, and he's going to argue, I guess, the statues were created somehow in relation to that, maybe? I don't know. I don't know. But again, I'm not interested in a part 2. I'm going to say this right now, because, again, I'm sorry to say, this has not been very good.
Established the Academy of
It's
Raya
very
Lucaria.
unfortunate.
Well, we've already spent time to establish the Eternal Empire's connections to the Carians. In the case of Ra, I'd like to point out that a number of statues within the ruins appear strikingly similar to the attire of the Nox, specifically the Night
What?
Maidens and their conical headpiece. We will discuss the most ancient cultures, including Ra, the ancient...
Do I think there's a connection here? I don't know. I could go either way on this one. I think it's an interesting point of connection. Could this increase the chance that there's a Nox connection? Maybe. It could also be that they're just referencing historical, like, headwears and stuff, and this is supposed to just be a crown for the queen as an alternate depiction of her. Again, the fact that they all appear to be robed women, right? Again, this very much kind of evokes the same idea of you have this, like, Virgin Mary statue of America and a lot of the heroes' graves and stuff. But then, of course, you have, you know, the spear woman statue for other parts of the empire. And then, of course, you have some of the, you know, actual, like, photorealistic, quote unquote, you know, depictions of America and statues at her churches and things like that, right? Like, I feel like this would just be an alternate depiction of the queen, and it would just be her crown. But could that still allude to at least a Nox connection? Maybe if we're going with the idea the queen is Newman, again, the same way that America has that depiction in her areas with the woman with the vessel, and we also see that with in the Nox. But as we know from the DLC, the two are not directly connected, right? At least so far as America herself is concerned, right? I guess you can make an argument maybe the shamans are, but again, the shamans go back to Rao, so then the argument would be, okay, so the shamans go back to Rao, and then Rao goes back to the Nox of the Eternal City, right? But that's, you know, we're already like so many points removed when we get over to America from there that it becomes like this question. I don't know. I think this is probably my favorite point in this vid so far, though, because it definitely is the one where I'm like, okay, this is actually thought-provoking. Like, where would I stand on something like this? I have no idea, honestly. I think it's just a very interesting detail here.
Peace. We will discuss the most ancient cultures, including Ra, the Ancient Dynasty, and Farum Azula further in a future video. But for now, I will say that while these three cultures certainly predate the...
Alright, so here's my take on the Ancient Dynasty. I used to be one who would think that the Ancient Dynasty has to predate the Eternal Cities, right? And mostly, I admit, most of this was just because of the architectural style, right? But I think much like New Londo and Dark Souls and stuff like that, I think the architectural style is not trying to denote era necessarily, but just note technological advancement. And the idea is that, again, the Nox are this highly advanced civilization, so you're going to show them with, like, all this gothic architecture and really fancy detailed, like, you know, little designs and things like that to really kind of highlight, you know, sort of the level of sophistication they have, right? And then you have something like the Ancient Dynasties, who I think they may be contemporary with the Eternal Cities, but that the Eternal Cities actually predate them. And that when Ancient Dynasties collapse, we see some of those people end up fleeing to, specifically Nokron, and come under, sort of, like, assimilate into the Nox society as a result. I don't think that... Yeah, I'm moving farther and farther away from this idea that the Ancient Dynasties... Because the Ancient Dynasties and the Ancient Civilization go hand in hand. It's very clear from that and their connections there. And therefore, it becomes so much harder to then argue that the Ancient Civ and the Ancient Dynasty aren't coming after the Eternal Cities, which, again, I would connect probably seemingly to go back all the way to Farum Azula. Again, I don't think you can kind of have it where like the ancient Civ and the ancient dynasties predate the Nox betraying the great betrayal of the Greater Fingers, which would have them establish the Eternal Cities and stuff like that. I think that would have to come before. So yeah, again, maybe something will change and my thought will go back to my original impression. But like right now, I'm just to be on the record here, I'm moving away from that. So I would not group Farum Azula with ancient dynasties in this context.
Empire. They do have a number of connections with it. As we know all too well, empires rise only to crumble under the march of time, but people survive. And the end of the Eternal Empire must have been spectacular indeed.
Okay.
Now we have reached a turning point in our story.
All right.
The betrayal. The Two Fingers are flawed envoys, unripe children born of a defective mother.
Okay.
Just as many characters in our story, Gideon, Enya, Ymir, and most importantly, Ranni, come to realize, any order mired by their influence will be doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Gideon gained true knowledge after his long exchange with the Two Fingers, discovering all had been broken long ago, and that the trembling fingers, bent with age, and the Erd Tree itself, were no exception.
Alright.
And so, the Nox of the Eternal Empire sought to free themselves from the control of the Fingers. They crafted armor specifically designed against their foe.
I actually think this is a good point, in that if you want to justify why did this betrayal occur, try to talk about how, like, the fact that, oh no, the Two Fingers and the Nox, they're fundamentally the Two Fingers that the Nox were worshipping were fundamentally broken, like, what later peoples are finding under America's, dominion. I think that's a very fair explanation, right? Again, I haven't devoted too much thought to sort of this motivation specifically of the betrayal and stuff like that, because you could also make the argument that it's just because it's not just the Fingers, it's the greater will as a whole that the Nox seem to go in. But I think you can make a justification that maybe it was just the Fingers, but then the greater will retaliated, and now they just hate, all things related to the greater will, period. They're like, okay, this isn't just a Fingers problem, this is the greater will in total, right? Like, this is just endemic to, frickin', big G above.
Helm fashioned from a crystal-looking glass, one among the Eternal City's ritual implements, worn by those committed to high treason. It wards off the intervention of the Greater Will and its vassal Fingers. The words of the Fingers are spelt in light, and we learn from the Iris of Grace in the DLC that this light will turn any human into our follower, essentially mind-controlling them through guidance, a puppet. With this in mind, it becomes clear how these reflective helmets prevent one from being taken control of by the Fingers. The Nox crafted a relic from the body of a god, and used this blade to strike a blow against the Greater Will's vassals. For it is stated clearly in the Nox attire, they desired the Age of the Stars. An age in which one must determine their own fate, as opposed to having their path decided for them by a defective envoy. Only, it was not enough. The Fingers were too powerful, and commanded the stars. The Estelles rained down upon the Eternal City, destroying it, and banishing the Nox to the underground.
Alright, so this is again, I know he kind of brushes over this too, right? He's kind of just jumped into the destruction of, again, the Eternal Cities did not exist when this betrayal happened, more than likely. It seems very much clear that whatever betrayal happened, it would happen while the Nox were mostly above ground. Again, the Japanese talks about the idea that they were basically just, they basically faced certain destruction, and so they had to go underground in order to avoid it, right? Like, they were all being killed and slaughtered above the skies, right? So what they needed to do is go where there was no sky to dare threaten them. Now, the argument would be, okay, well, what's the threat that happens under the sun of the open sky? I would argue dragons, because that's what we see the Nox in the Eternal Cities focus on. Okay, you've got dragons? Well, we're going to create our own dragons. And, well, they were utter failures, right? Like, they weren't able to really match up to a true dragon, at least to the Nox's preferences, right? So, with all that in mind, I would be like, okay, so it seems like it's very much has to do with any connection to Farum Azula, not to anything related to the Estelles. And again, the whole incidents with the Estelle ties into the Eternal Darkness, which ties again into the fact that Eternal Darkness can't really be involved, nor the Estelles in the destruction of the Nameless Eternal City until after the events with Godwyn and Marika probably shattering the Elden Ring and all that stuff, because of what we understand about, like, you know, the destruction itself and the golems that are involved with the gargoyles and things like that. Like, there's just too much there that ties it all together to the Nameless Eternal City was around up until relatively recently. Again, up until maybe in the midst of the shattering, if not in the events leading up to it. So yeah, I think we got ourselves a problem here.
Malformed star born in the lightless void far away.
Yep.
That once destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky. A falling star of ill omen. A race of astrologers forced underground, their city in ruins, no longer able to observe the stars.
I should probably...
This is where the story of the Nox will end for this video at least.
Okay.
But we will continue it in the next video of the series, which will explore the cultural, religious, and biological changes the Nox underwent after being forced into the underground. For the rest of this story, we will be focusing on the overworld and what happened to the remnants of the Eternal Empire left after its collapse. For it is important to note that while the Nox were banished and the Eternal City was leveled, likely leading to a societal collapse, many of the Eternal Empire's citizens must have survived above ground. Just as the collapse of the Roman Empire did not spell an end for all of its subjects, people would move forward, even if they lost much of the knowledge held by their former civilization. As we previously discussed, many astrologers remained above ground and went on to found glintstone sorcery. The Black Knives are described as Numen as well as descendants of the Eternal, and so we can extrapolate that the Numens were a race within this larger civilization. After the collapse, some of the Numen population returned to a more humble lifestyle, eventually coming to reside within the Shaman village.
He is trying to make a case now
this
that...
collapse would have left a power vacuum in the
Okay.
lands between, and I believe this is the point at which another civilization, the Hornsent, rose to power. The Hornsent built the tower in Europe.
Alright, yeah, no. I mean, again, I guess I have to get one last thing in here. Yeah, no. It seems very clear, look at the trees, look at everything having to do with the culture and stuff. If you want to believe that Rao has a god, probably a Numen god, then the Shaman village very clearly more readily connects to Rao than it does to anything related to some hypothetical, unified, eternal city civilization way back when. Also, hey, Eamon, welcome to the chat. Yes, we're playing the game with the Simon of Dong. But the actual, like, the idea that the Hornsent come from this unified ancient eternal city civilization versus just Rao, I struggle with this. Like, I very much struggle with this idea. It very much seems like, yeah, you have the Rao civilization established, that collapses, and that leads to getting the Hornsent civilization as well as Marika's village. So, like, again, I think again, this is the video that says Nox are the missing link to Elden Ring's timeline. Again, I think this is putting way too much. Again, that is all of this is being held together by a single solitary pin. And that is that Lusat is one of the ancient sorcerers from the days of the founding reign of stars, which again, as we said at the very beginning, is not true. That's just bunk. Which means everything else coming from this is also bunk. Unfortunate.
Elden Ring for themselves.
So unfortunate.
The fact that they had to build this tower implies two things. One, that before this there was no god present in the lands between, and that the Elden Ring was lost.
No. What this means is that the Hornsent wanted to achieve godhood, because that's their entire culture, is about reaching divinity. That again, this is the problem without, like, actually understanding the different cultures. Like, I haven't even done my deep dive on the Hornsent, and I can understand, like, some of these basic outlines here. Like, this is, like, the idea there was no god before them. Again, that sounds incredibly difficult to believe, especially if you want to talk about how the two fingers are here. Because the whole point of the two fingers is to be able to establish a faith with a god in it. So what were they doing? And again, what about the dagger then? You talk about how the dagger was used for the god, then we're trying to say there was no god? Well, I don't know. Maybe he's just talking about, like, okay, after the collapse of this ancient civilization, there was no god before that. No, I don't know. That's just poorly worded, man.
The Nox's betrayal must have been at least partially successful. The fingers fell from power, reduced to finding Empyreans where they could, and hoping that one would rise to godhood and return them to power.
Why wouldn't they be doing this
Fingers are
before
likely
that?
the oldest
Yeah,
life forms on the planet.
why is this
Their
understanding there
mother,
were no?
Meteor, being
Again,
the
I see
first shooting
so
star
many
to fall
problems
upon
here.
the lands between. They are the reason we can observe such a consistent system of gods and lords throughout the timeline. Starting with Placidusax and the Ancient Dragon,
Oh.
carried through to the Eternal Empire, and finally being brought back into power.
All right, so the argument would be that, okay, Farum Azula brings us the Elden Ring, and I presume the two fingers, but it doesn't bring us godhood. I'm sorry, I find that very hard to believe when we literally see a statue of a woman surrounded by the beasts underneath the Elden Ring. Like, the idea that, okay, we don't have a god who, again, as he defines, is a vessel or potential vessel. I would quibble with that detail, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. Of the Elden Ring, like, again,
By Marika. Through this lens, Marika was essentially reviving a dead empire by establishing the Golden Order, returning the Fingers to power.
Oh boy.
And as such, she earns the moniker, Marika the Eternal. Just as the Fingers force history...
I mean, Marika refers to herself as the Eternal Queen, obviously because she wants to be the Eternal Queen. I don't think there's any, like, deep idea, like, oh, there's this ancient civilization of the Eternal, which Marika is trying to restore here. Like, again, from everything we know about her, I doubt she would even be aware of such an empire existing, at the very least when she's first starting things out.
To repeat itself, the Nox's legacy would be carried on by another descendant of the Eternal Empire, a Carian princess,
Oh, God.
heir to the astrologers.
I would not be controlled by that thing.
But that is a story for another time. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like or subscribing as it really helps the channel.
Uh-huh.
You can also
You
become
heard
a
that,
channel
chat?
member and get access to exclusive perks.
Oh.
And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Alright, so... what do I think? Well, I think I don't need to say it. It's very clear. I think this is just a bad video. I think it's based on an absurdity, and it has a bunch of other absurdity sort of laid in there. There's, again, one or two like things where I'm like, oh, those are good idea points, but, you know, two good points does not make a video. It does not make an entire theory. So yeah, this one's rough, chat. I don't like going hard on people like this, but, like, I did not have a lot to work with here. There was not a lot to work with here. I will not be listening to any part 2. I don't care if you guys are suggesting for this. This is... I'm just going to be repeating what I said. Like, all of this is based on just total absurdity. I'm mixed on this one. I feel a lot more than mixed. I am mostly negative here. Again, no hate to the creator. So, guys, please, again, no brigading, no doing any of that crap or whatever, right? If I see any of that for you, I'm going to be, like, you know, banished from my site. But again... what do you guys want me to look at this? I've looked at this. I've reviewed it. All I can say is it's not that good. It's not very good. That's such a shame. I would love if more small creators had, like, some really good, like, really solid, like, stuff I can at least, like, 80% agree with and something, right? But alas, it is not meant to be. Now, to show that I am a fair and magnanimous person, we will be looking at let me just get rid of you. We will also be watching another suggestion, which is Vati's video on Mesmer. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. I've talked a little bit about this in the past, but Vati and I had a back and forth, privately, of course, going over our different thoughts on the timeline. I established my perspective. He established his. I assume he's going to go forward with his on this one, so I'm very curious where he's going to go on this with Mesmer. I myself haven't done a deep dive on Mesmer, so I'm open to actually learning a lot of stuff from this one, right? And there may be a lot of details that I don't know or I haven't seen before that he's going to point out here, and who knows, he might even change my perspective on some of the stuff involving Mesmer in the timeline. We'll see. We'll see. This could be good.
Deep in the forest, by Bonny Village, lies the shed skin of a great serpent.
Ooh.
Why it's here is a mystery, one the community has yet to unravel. We know from Rykard's lore that serpents...
Alright, this is not specific to Vati's question here, but this is in general. I find that mystery is kind of like a PR term. It's only a mystery if you don't accept the proposed solution to it, right? Like there's tons of things that people will talk about as, oh, they've been solved, right? Like, how many times do you get a new news article about solve the death of Tutankhamun or something like that, right? Like, there's always a reason or explanation. The question is always, is this explanation, one, the truth? And two, sufficient evidence so that you can believe it to be the truth, right? Those are the two things that go into it, right? Again, like, or say like Jack the Ripper, right? Like there's been so many canons brought forward on who Jack the Ripper is. There's arguments, oh, we got it, now we have DNA and stuff like that. Oh, you know, there's reason to doubt the DNA or something like that, right? Like there's always going to be a reason to doubt something, right? So as long as someone does not believe that the answer suffices, yeah, it's going to be a mystery. Or even if you want to not be that extreme, just say, as long as there's enough people who have not heard or accepted the explanation, yeah, it's going to be a mystery. So generally speaking, I don't like going around with this idea of, oh, it's a mystery or something, because there could be someone who's actually come out with a video that quote unquote solves that mystery. And maybe you're like, yeah, that's just a theory, or, you know, there's other things to do so, and it's not definitive, or right. Like there's always going to be something to, you know, dissect about that here. This one's going to be cool. You guys are hyping this up, so I'm looking forward to it. Again, I only have nice things to say about Vaati, so I'm really hopeful for this one because I don't get to see enough of his videos lately. So
serpents like this are reviled, but we don't know why. We don't know why Messmer has his 2 winged companions. We don't know why an abyssal serpent writhes within him.
And again, this is going to some of the things that Vaati's saying. Like, again, you could say we don't know why. Well, what are we defining now as no? Because at some point, you have to say that something doesn't necessarily have to be spelled out for everything to more or less point to that direction, right? And then at one point you could say, well, we don't know, but like, at least it's a reasonable presumption, right? So I do feel like, again, this is again just Vaati doing this for framing and trying to, you know, set up a video and things like that. But for the purpose of like lore analysis and things like that, at some point we kind of have to accept that not everything is going to be written out or spelled out for you in that exact terms, and you need to have enough media literacy to be able to analyze what that piece of art is doing, understand the artist's intentions, and be able to make a judgment call on that. Now, again, the question is your judgment call right? And have you established enough of a case in order for people to believe that you're right? And that's where discussion and debate and all that stuff, and what, you know, the fun part that Miyazaki has with, you know, this whole community coming together to try to solve these quote-unquote mysteries.
Nor why Marika, in her fear, sealed it away. But the less we know, the more infinite the possibilities, and that is what makes Elden Ring's lore so mesmerizing.
Vaati, I disagree with you there. I think what's interesting about Elden Ring's lore is that it tells a very clear and consistent story, despite the fact it does not rely on traditional exposition methods in order to convey that entire narrative. That's what I personally think is interesting about Elden Ring and its story, and this applies to all the Souls games, right? In fact, Elden Ring, I would say, suffers actually the worst in that a lot of times it tells you too much. I don't like Gideon. I think Gideon gives you too much unnecessary exposition for crap, because either it's stuff that either gets mentioned or talked about or alluded to elsewhere, or it's just stuff that, quite honestly, I feel like could have been put in a million other forms if you really want to include some of that information, right? And again, some of it I just think is redundant. So it's like, I actually am not a big fan of how, like, again, quote unquote, dumbed down Elden Ring is. I don't think it's like major or anything. There's still a lot of that, you know, Souls DNA that everyone loves and stuff like that. But there's no denying that Miyazaki definitely tried to move at least a little bit. I'm trying to make sure that, okay, this is my narrative I'm telling, right, where I could do whatever I want. This is Martin's stuff, so I feel like I need to work a little bit harder to establish a baseline for these fans, for them to be able to follow Martin's narrative. And you know what? Fair enough, right? I'm not gonna, you know, poo-poo him for that. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I wouldn't say that's like, oh man, I love this idea that, you know, I can look at this thing and I can find a million different possibilities for us going. It's like, no, I like to be able to find the one possibility by sorting out all the data you do get. You find you create you form the puzzle around the missing piece, and then you get to understand, oh, that's the missing piece, that shape, that's very specific shape from all these little puzzle pieces I've arranged around it, right? That's what I think makes the Souls narrative so compelling, right? But again, you know, difference of opinion, I guess.
The circumstances of Messmer's birth are the most
like the transition.
fascinating thing about him. Who was his father?
Ooh, okay.
When was he born? Why was he the vessel for both a malevolent snake and an unquenchable fire? That first question is probably the easiest to answer. Messmer's father is most likely Radagon.
Okay.
For one, Mesmer bears Radagon's signature red hair. Second, his boss music seems to carry similar leitmotifs from Radagon's own theme. And third, most importantly, Mesmer has his own butterfly. This is the black pyrefly, which burns in dark and slender ribbons of fire. Named so for Mesmer's habit of making a pyre out of his defeated foes, this butterfly is symbolic of his identity, and it's a dark counterpart to the butterflies of Melina, Melania, and Miquella, who are the other children of Marika and Radagon. But this parentage poses a problem.
Now, Chad, can you establish
Usually-
this for me? Has Vati actually talked about the idea of Melina being a child of Radagon in the past? Like, I want to assume yes, but I don't know. Is this like new lore he's dropping on everybody, or is this something he's actually talked about in like his Glowmite Queen stuff or something? Legitimately curious if this is something he's talked about, or if this is the first time he's like mentioning this idea. Because I would not say looking at Melina that, oh, she's a daughter of Radagon, again, separate from Mesmer. If you establish her, again, if you make the connection that she is Mesmer's sister that's referenced in his eyes and stuff, and it'd be like, you know, they may be like a twin situation, like maybe Melania and Miquella, I could see that. But like, by itself, I don't know. So like, I'm actually curious where he got his argument for the Radagon connection here. I don't recall. Yeah, I'm very much curious about that, because this for me is much more interesting. Again, I've talked about it before. I could see a lot of counter arguments to the Radagon Mesmer connection, but I'm not going to close it down. I just don't see enough where, again, this goes back to the mystery thing. I don't see enough where I would personally connect him to Radagon over Godfrey, especially for people who want to, you know, date his birth to before Godfrey. At which point I'm like, yeah, no, definitely not going to happen then. But again, I also have trouble with dating Radagon, honestly, to before Mesmer's birth, regardless, and before his crusade even. So we'll, again, see where Vati's gonna go with this. Again, I'm still very much open to this Radagon parentage idea. It's just, there's so many questions I would have about Radagon first that I want to be established, where I'm like, okay, we can firmly say Radagon was born here for this reason, for that, right? If that was established, I'd be like, okay, then the idea that Marika and Radagon having a child, which would be Mesmer and Melina, I'd be totally down for that. Again, though, I would have a lot of questions like, okay, why is this happening? Why are they giving birth to it? What would be the purpose to that? How does this fit or advance anything that Marika is trying to do? Was it just something they did just to see, well, let's test it just because? Like, there's a lot of questions I would have.
We can place Marika's children along the timeline based on her consort. We know that Godwyn, Mohg, and Morgott were born of Marika's union with Godfrey, as the age of the Erdtree was beginning. We know Rani, Rykard, and Radahn were born of Radagon's union with Rennala, at the conclusion of the Liurnian Wars. And we know that Miquella and Melania were twins born of Marika's marriage to Radagon, after Radagon returned to become the second Elden Lord.
Okay.
But since Marika could immaculately conceive with her other half at any time, Mesmer, like Melina, could have been born whenever it was convenient to Marika.
Well, again, what is the argument now for convenience then, right? Like, again, this again goes back to the idea of, okay, what is convenient for Marika about the birth of two more kids? Again, I legit don't understand where sort of the child rearing part comes in. Like, how much of this is just Marika wanting to be a parent and a mother, and how much of this would be like, oh, she's got these big plans, right? I'm very much, they're all Radagon's kids because butterflies. Yeah, again, I don't think the butterflies by themselves are really good indicators, right? Because you could make an argument then that you could make the case that other factors might be at play, like say them all being like Empyreans and stuff, right? Like, there's nothing confirmed with Mesmer or anything on that, but like, again, someone could probably come out with that type of idea or something like that, right? So I wouldn't want to like pigeonhole it by itself. Again, if you go with the hair, then you're like, okay, well, there's the red hair and then there's the butterflies, right? Like, a cumulative case is what you'd want with something like Mesmer's parentage and stuff like that, for sure. I am curious now, like, again, Vati has me intrigued. Where are we going with this?
Which makes it way harder to place him upon the timeline.
Okay, fair enough.
Fortunately, though, we do have some clues. The first comes from the statue of Marika with Messmer in her arms.
Okay.
Here, you'll notice that Marika's left braid of hair has been severed.
Yep.
The loss of this hair is an important moment in Marika's story.
Right.
For after she ascended as a god, she returned home and made an offering of her golden braid to the grandmother of...
I already have an issue here. There's nothing stating that was when she returned and left the braid there. Absolutely nothing. In fact, I would date this incident with the home to being during the Crusade. I would not date this. I would I would never date this to her first becoming a god. Like, no. Just would not happen, I don't think. I don't think that this is where this happens on the timeline. Oh, she becomes a god and stuff. Because then you're making the argument, well, okay, before Marika even becomes a god, Messmer is around, like, oh, that's going to cause a lot of issues, especially considering Messmer's crusade can't even happen until, at the very minimum, you're putting it to after the Giant War. And there's so much other stuff that's going on as well during... I've got so many problems here with this. Alright, so... Alrighty, like, Vati's kind of losing me on this part, but again, we'll see where we're going here.
So, from this statue, we know that Marika had already ascended as a god.
I should also talk about, because we only find these statues with Messmer stuff, in the, like, Marika has these statues that are only in the Realm of Shadow and stuff like that. We of course see a more modern statue outside the Lands Between. I think it's reasonable to say that the statues that we see in the Realm of Shadow were the statues that you'd originally see in some of those churches and places, and then they would later be replaced with the more modern statue we're more familiar with, right? I would also be okay with it, not only because of the whole braid situation, obviously, with Marika with those statues, but also just because we see a lot of depictions of Marika with that same pose, and it's with the Erd tree, but not a very obvious crucible-type tree, right? There's no red with that Erd tree. It's usually just, it's also portrayed normally, like, straight upright and stuff, versus, you know, the tilt we see with both trees normally. But the point is, like, obviously, it seems to be, like, just showing, like, the Erd tree. It doesn't seem to be showing the Erd tree as its original form, as the crucible. So, I feel like it's fair to make the assessment that the Erd tree is a good indicator that the statues and stuff probably got replaced later down the line after Marika cuts her hair, yes, and after you know, or at the very least around the same time that the crucible is basically dying and losing its red. But yeah, that's a side point. Let's get on to his main point about, you know, talk about the birth of Marika here.
When she had Messmer, though perhaps that goes without saying. Our next clue comes to us from the Remembrance of the Wild Boar Rider, which, especially in the Japanese description, makes it quite clear that Messmer was an elder brother to Radahn.
Yep.
For context, Radahn was the son of Radagon and Rennala, the Champion of Gold and the Queen of Caria, who were wed at the Church of Vows following the First and Second Leonian Wars.
Yep.
So, Messmer was born early enough that Radahn looked up to him like an older brother. What else can help us place?
No, that's not what it says. Again, this goes back to a conversation I had with Vati. Vati, that's not what it says. All it says is that Messmer and Gaius were able to bond over, one, their shared, quote-unquote, you know, they both had a quote-unquote curse, you know, right? And the fact that, yes, Radahn was Messmer's older brother to both of them, right? That doesn't speak anything to their actual personal relationship with each other or anything like that. All it's really making the point of is that Radahn is, in fact, Messmer's older brother. It's not trying to say, like, they were close, they respected or looked up to each other. There's none of that there. That would be reading into the text. Now, that may be true, right? But it's not something that the text is actually telling us. And that's something very important to establish. Again, I've said it before. I think the idea that you're going to push Messmer's time outside of the Realm of Shadow to after Radahn's birth, I think that is very, very, very problematic on multiple levels. And I know why Vati's doing this, because again, I've talked to him about this. It's because he believes that Gaius has to be joining Messmer's crusade from the very beginning. And again, I'm sorry, I don't think any of the evidence or anything that we have in the game actually indicates that. I think quite the opposite. It must happen later in the timeline. And again, and I think I should have honestly mentioned this to Vati as well, let's not, like, try to pretend that there's only one way to get into the Realm of Shadow other than, you know, the method via Miquella and stuff, right? However you think that Messmer and his army ended up there in the realm, and at what point in the timeline you think the center of the Lands Between ended up there in that realm, it's very clear that it doesn't require necessarily just like Marika or One Way or whatever, because we also have the Death Knights. The Death Knights, of course, firmly date to after, of course, Mesmer's crusade and all that. They come much later in the timeline. I think everyone would universally agree on that. And yet the Death Knights have also ended up in the realm of Shadow. They have no connection to Miquella. They have only a big connection there to Godwyn, and the whole idea with them is that they have become their works and stuff have become lost because obviously they were in the Lands Between for some time with their arts, and then they left, and so along with them, their arts become lost. Because they're, again, in a completely separate dimension, hidden from everybody. So, again, I think that, again, I have problems with this one for sure.
Well, one great suggestion comes from the community. As the theory goes, Messmer the Impaler might have been present during Godfrey's war against the fire giants.
Okay, that's an
The
interesting
main piece
idea.
of evidence, the giant corpses are impaled upon spears, a signature of Messmer the Impaler.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you can make an argument that maybe Mesmer is taking inspiration from that practice of impaling the giants, but I don't think that's a good enough indicator that he himself was involved. Because again, where is Mesmer deciding he's going to become the Impaler from? You know, in the name of the Erd Tree for Marika. So again, his entire practice of impaling, for all we know, is something mandated by Marika. Who are the two people that we know are definitely involved in the Giant War? Godfrey and Marika. So like, whatever argument you can make for Mesmer, you could just as easily make for Marika, and then Mesmer adopting it later on because, you know, he's the son. So I do have some issues with that. But they're also at Liurnia. They're also at Liurnia camps because we also see them adopted by the. We see the same practice being adopted by the. What are they called? The fire monks, right? So it's a practice that goes back to the Giant War, but that doesn't mean that it's been limited to Mesmer and stuff. Now, I think Vati might argue, well, the Fire Monks adopted it, but maybe Mesmer was the one who originally did it, and then they sort of adopted it from there. And again, my only argument would be, well, you could say the same then for Mesmer himself. Why couldn't he have just adopted it from something Marika did in the Giant War? Seems like a Thorn Sorcerer thing, or at least plant magic in general. I would not say that because I would not specifically tie that to the Thorn Sorcerers, because we have, I forget who it is, but someone pointed out how this is actually a door that connects to one of the memories and stuff, and it's really cool. I think it was Illusory Wall. Again, go check out his channel. I feel like the entire notion that, you know, if you see thorns, it has to be connected to Thorn Sorcerers doesn't really work, because we know, one, we see stuff like, again, in the realm of Shadow at Shadowkeep, how there's a bunch of, you know, quote-unquote, like, thorn sorcery that is being done under Mesmer stuff. So I don't think it has to necessarily connect to the Fire Monk Thorn Sorcerers, or just, like, you know, like, generic Thorn Sorcery. We also, and all of that Thorn Sorcery is based on the Shadow Tree and the Erd Tree, right? And because they do those, they call it impenetrable thorns in English, but the Japanese is more accurately a thorns of rejection, right? You know, the idea that, you know, you completely, you know, you push something out, you don't, you know, you want to keep it away, that type of idea, right? To refuse something, you know, to be like, you know, I'm pushing back on this, right? That's very much the idea with the thorns, and you can make an easy argument that that's just what Marika's doing here, is the idea that I am rejecting you, your giants, everything you stand for, and I'm making a statement about that by doing this. And the Fire Monks who will come after, they see, you know, what Marika's doing there, and then, you know, they're adopting that same practice. Now, how does that tie into the Thorn Sorcerers who seem to be like prisoners and stuff, who are sort of, you know, roped into this system? I could see you making a case that maybe they took inspiration from these thorns that, from the Giant War as well, or whatever. But yeah, I would not. If this is like the commonly accepted community explanation, I don't know. Vati didn't say that per se. He just, who knows? Maybe it's just like a fringe theory. I don't know. But I would not agree with this statement, whatever the case. I definitely think that, I think if you want to tie Mesmer to the Giant War, you would need more than that. The problem is, I don't know if you can come up with more than that. I'd be more willing to believe it if Mesmer did Shadow Tree Impenetrable Thorn moves. I'd agree with you there. If we saw something like that, I would totally be able to buy this thing. Because at the very least, you can make the argument that, okay, well, Mesmer's doing something like the Thorn Sorcerers, but it wouldn't make sense for him with everything else that he does that might be more connected to, like, holiness and faith and stuff with his fire and things like that. So maybe he's actually doing something that goes back to the Giant War. Maybe they retextured it as such, right? Like, again, I have so many problems with this specific explanation. But again, let's see. Is this the one Vati's going to go with, or is this just one of the possibilities he wants to point out to people?
Perhaps this is where he earned his title. Further support for this theory comes from the fact that Mesmer is technically a knight referred to as Sir Mesmer, and such knighthood is typically earned through notable deeds.
Oh, okay. This is not exactly true. Now, typically, again, he's a sir in the same way that Gideon Ofnir is a sir, which is to say, not at all. It's just a title. It's just how they're rendering the honorific to refer to someone who's a generic lord, right? Someone who's of some high noble status or higher, right? Again, this goes back to the fact that Mesmer, the Impaler, is the impaling lord. That is the Japanese terminology for the Impaler. So when they call him a lot of times Lord Mesmer or something like that, that is what they're going back to and referencing. So this idea of, oh, this adds to it because he is referred to as a knight. No, that's not it at all. Oh, Vati. I could have swore I put the Impaling Lord stuff in the doc things for you on there. So, oh my. Did I maybe I should have double checked to make sure I did the same for some of the dialogue and stuff and made that clear there as well. Because, oh boy, that's not a piece of evidence. I was like, I don't think there's much more than that. Then he mentioned it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready to listen. And then, like, no, he doesn't. He actually doesn't.
In battle. Perhaps these were the deeds that led to him becoming known as the Impaler.
Oh, this is not a good...
All that said, this theory isn't perfect. You'll note that
for sure,
spears impaling the giants don't perfectly match Mesmer's own. Instead, they're actually a perfect match for these stakes in the nearby camps.
Yes, this would be very true. But again, I don't know why he would try to connect it to those specifically, because you could just make, again, this argument of copying or adopting, right? I mean, to be fair, it's still it's still obviously like an Impaler type of, stake thing. Like, it's kind of Trident-y or something like that, which is kind of like Mesmer's thing. So I wouldn't say it has to be perfect. I mean, one's made of metal, the other's clearly, at least partially, seemingly made of, like, plant stuff, right? So I'm willing to, like, suspend myself on that. I just think the entire premise is silly. Right? Like, I'm not gonna hate on the exact shape. I think the imperfections are, like I said earlier, like, I think the premise is silly, and I think the argument that Mesmer is a sir, and therefore a knight, and therefore could have been a knight in the war, is also fallacious.
Of the Thorn Sorcerers. This strongly suggests that it was the Thorn Sorcerers, not Mesmer, that may have been responsible for the giants.
And again, as I said, I don't think so. I think this just has to be connected to, again, I think the most likely possibility is America. There's a reason you have the Church of Repose among all the giants that are having their eternal rest impaled there. Like, I don't think it takes much to put two and two together. Oh, America was here? Had an entire church there? What significant thing was she doing there among all these giants that are impaled on stakes? Oh. Again, the Thorn Sorcerers, I'd be more willing to say, again, yeah, Fire Monks clearly have adopted it from, say, the Giant War and stuff like that, and the Thorn Sorcerers also develop out of the Fire Monks. Could it be because they were studying these? Could it be kind of just like they were inspired by these? Maybe. Could also be something independent that sort of just kind of goes together, happens to, one of those happy little accidents, right?
Impaling.
Anyway.
However, if you still prefer to believe that Mesmer was involved here, then there is still a way to argue for it.
Okay.
User Tyrion Bananister on Reddit makes the great point that Mesmer's modern spear was remade by the forging arts of the Realm of Shadow.
Okay.
A fact that might help to account for this visual discrepancy. It really comes down to you. Did Mesmer develop his impaling technique here alongside the Thorn Sword?
Well, considering that this would be the only real good argument for Mesmer being around this early in Marika's reign, I mean, I think it'd be very important that people would be very invested in wanting to believe this, because otherwise he's just sort of, again, otherwise we don't have him appearing, a firm confirmation of his existence before the events of the Crusade, right? So, like, yeah. Now we have confirmation of the elements of his sister and stuff. So he could be around a lot. You could date him like a bit farther back, but then the question would be is how long his sister was around, right? And that's the problem, is that both of them have ambiguous enough positions in the timeline that, like Vati said, you do have a bit of flexibility on where exactly you want to put them. Now, again, whether or not they're children of Radagon or not, I would not place Melina and Mesmer until after the Giant War, until sometime during the Age of Plenty, right? They'd be born around there. Again, I don't think this idea that, oh, well, America could have, given immaculately conceived. I wouldn't even say it's immaculately conception. I would argue they probably still have to do the deed and stuff like that. I would hazard a guess, but what do I know? What do I know about how gods do the dirty, right? But we'll have to see. We need America fight in Night Rain with Thornmoose, specifically in regards to Smith's script. I don't know what we're gonna see with Night Raid and stuff, but I would be interested if they somehow find a way to shoehorn in Radagon. Like they actually like give Radagon like actual like war armor or something, and they include him as a boss fight, and they're like, they just call him like, I don't know, Hero of the Wars or something like that, or a Great Hero or something, something silly. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would not. I don't see a good argument for him coming way before that, because the best thing you could say is, oh, Mesmer's Crusade also has the like the giant head things ornamenting the brazier stuff, but I'm like, that's just American civilization in general. Like it's again, a lot of the soldiers and people were involved in that war with the giants, so like, yeah, of course they know what they look like. That doesn't have to be Mesmer specific or him like directing them to do it. So yeah, I'm curious why he feels this is so important to mention. Is he going to talk about like several different possible backstories to Mesmer now, or is this the one he's going to go with? He thinks this is the most likely, and he wants to build upon that from there. I'm very curious now.
It's possible, but it's far from a bygone conclusion.
Okay.
Let's move on to the other evidence surrounding Mesmer's birth. According to Godric's Great Rune, the first demigods were the Elden Lord Godfrey and his offspring, the Golden Lineage.
Okay.
If we take this at face value, it certainly seems to suggest that Mesmer wasn't Marika's firstborn. Instead, it seems like that title would go to one of Godfrey's children. Most likely Godwyn, though perhaps even Mohg or Morgoth. That said, while I do take most...
I've talked about it before. I would say I think Godofroy has a stronger claim than Godwyn. Again, I got nothing against saying that Godwyn could be the firstborn or stuff like that, and there's something else going on with Godofroy and Godric and stuff related to how they appear and things like that. I just think based on everything we have and what we know and everything, I feel it's a lot safe, especially with what we know with the Giant War and the stuff going on with Commander Niall. Yeah, it's Niall, right? It's not O'Neill. Yeah, it's Niall. I think it's definitely a stronger case to argue for Godofroy being probably the firstborn. But again, it could be another character we don't know about. Like I have no problems with that either. So that's how he summons the spear back in his hands after throwing it, or spawn many spears jutting out of the ground, similar to the anvil hammer skill. So you think that you think that let's say hypothetically a Mesmer got added in the boss fight, and like with what we see with some of the other bosses, it looks like they're getting new moves. Do you think that you would want to see something like that to be able to really kind of clarify that type of connection, huh? I mean, maybe. The thing is that I feel like I don't think we're gonna actually get a Radagon or Marika fight in Night Rain. I would actually be surprised if we also got a Mesmer fight. Like I'm okay with us getting a quote unquote Godric fight, because I'm pretty sure it's just Godofroy, and that's how they're gonna make the distinction and stuff like that, so they can avoid saying it's Godric or anything. But yeah, I feel like when we're going to talk about like the Golden Lineage and stuff, this is kind of like a side point on the Mesmer discussion. So I feel it's better to kind of focus on like, okay, I think Teen Sith also put up this idea before. The idea that, okay, maybe Mesmer was born before the Golden Lineage, but he was not made a demigod until after joining the Golden Lineage. Again, I have a lot of problems with this. Again, it goes into the same idea of Marika having children before actually formally becoming a god and things like that. I think there's a lot of issues going into there. He talks about the snakeskin at the beginning, so I don't know if he's going to tie that into Mesmer's birth, or if he's going to connect it down to Mesmer like I do later in the timeline. We shall see. But I feel like from what we have in the game, the safest conclusion is that Mesmer is born sometime after the Giant War during the Age of Plenty along with Melina. Probably both of them, or at least Mesmer, originally had a connection to Gelmir, which comes with how he ends up with some of the wise snakes and stuff, because I can imagine, like, maybe one of the snakes that are born from Gelmir's snake god is the wise snake or something like that. I could see something like that being the scenario, right? And that through Mesmer's connection to Gelmir and its snake pagans and stuff like that, Melina ends up getting involved with them, and that leads to them doing the whole conspiring that leads to the whole Glowmite Queen incident and stuff. No, what I'm saying is Mesmer says it was remade in Shadowlands style. It was remade with Smith. Wait, no, I'm a little confused, Xavier, on what you're trying to say there, but it was remade with Smith script. So what you're saying is you think that it doesn't, just because it's made in Shadowlands style, it's just because of the Smith script thing. It isn't trying to say the whole spear was remade to the degree that Vati would be implying that, okay, it would be a plant spear, but it was remade into the metal spear that we're familiar with. Again, I don't have the text in front of me, and I'm not going to pull it up right now, so yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to accept the idea that it was remade. I just don't know if that's the I don't know if that would be the argument to make of, therefore, plant spear, right? Because I could make the argument that, like, okay, it was remade or whatever, but, like, it was remade to be more black or use the black metals. Because, most of the Shadowkeep and stuff has, like, this black look to it, from the stone to some of the characters and the knights and things like that. So I'd be willing to believe something like that over, anything else. Alrighty, but let's continue with the vid. We're getting so off track because Vati going slightly off track, but he's gonna tie it together, I'm sure.
Item descriptions as absolute truths. This line about the first demigods gives me pause because it reminds me of that other item description that claims Godfrey is the first Elden Lord.
Alright, this is actually a good point to be made, right? If you wanted to make an argument that the text is true, but not in the way you think, then the argument would be, let's look at some of the ambiguity, right? Like, Godfrey is the first Elden Lord in Marika's empire, right? Like, that is the implicit there. Because if you try to take that and interpret that in a wider abstract that he's the first Elden Lord ever to exist in the Lands Between period, well, then you got some problems because you have Placky, and Placky predates the Erdtree even. So you can't really make an argument of Placky being an Elden Lord after Radagon, after Godfrey. Well, maybe after Radagon for sure, right? So that becomes a very good avenue, I'd say, if you want to make an argument on Mesmer and being like, okay, yeah, the first demigods were the Golden Lineage, which are Godfrey's children and stuff like that. But maybe there's something you can make there. I want to see how he tries to argue this. Because I can see that this would be the case if you want to make, okay, the first demigods in Marika's actual kingdom, but there were demigods that were born before the kingdom was established, and therefore before demigods were formally recognized or something like that. Like some loophole that you could argue around here, right? Because this is the point you have to do so, right? And again, Vati acknowledges, again, this has to be done with the assumption that the text is true. And again, as I've always said, my preconception is to fundamentally trust the text. And the goal of us is to, as interpreters of the text, is to understand not if the text is true, but how it is true. Now, again, there will always be exceptions. There could be typos, there could be some mistakes, or, something or whatever. They'd never get corrected or something like that. That's always a possibility to consider. There's always that room for human error. But generally speaking, you should not be, you should be resorting that to whenever there's a text that you find inconvenient. You at the very least have to kind of look over and try to see. And if it doesn't work, then maybe you have to consider those other options. But generally speaking, I agree with Vati here. You should, if we're assuming the text is true, the question then is how it is true. And maybe there's some loopholes that can help shift our understanding of how this is true and stuff like that. So I'd be interested.
Placidusax is. In truth, Godfrey was merely considered the first Elden Lord, and so I wonder if calling Godfrey and his golden lineage the first demigods might be a similar piece of propaganda. So, was Mesmer formally considered a part of the golden lineage?
I wouldn't call it propaganda, but sure.
More likely, was he a bastard demigod, born before Godfrey, or after, and shunned by him?
Okay.
It's certainly up to your own interpretation.
Okay.
Whatever the case, one thing is certain. Mesmer has lived for a very long time. What his helm description...
I will say this, I say this with Smotown, I say this with other creators and stuff. I don't like this whole, like, okay, well, it's up to your interpretation. Well, yeah, duh, obviously. Like, like it's your video. Like, it's not my video. It's not Xavier's video. It's not like I am, like, right? Like, of course it's like, well, our interpretation is going to decide whether we believe you or not, Vati, right? Like, again, this isn't specific to Vati, right? But generally speaking, it's like, well, yeah, like, just give me your account, and then we can like pick apart if like if there's any like holes or something in it or something like that, right? Like I feel like what this is telling me is that Vati, again, this is maybe not Vati's intention, but it gives me the sense that Vati himself isn't really confident in any of this, so he's just being like, well, I'm throwing up my hands, here's the best that I can come up with in terms of all these possibilities. I don't know where I really land on this. Well, that might be a problem if it's dependent upon some of these things for some of what he says later on. But let's see. Maybe he is going to be like, you know what, I'm going to go with this because I think this is the most likely of all of them. And you know what, I just want to, lay out the case for other people because you know what, I think that they have at least a leg to stand on. And I think that's fair, at the very least.
Calls an eternity of suffering. Another thing that helps convince me of Messmer's old age is the fact that we know so little about the dark kindling and the wicked serpent within him. Thus, I feel like his birth could have been closer to a dark period within the lore.
I don't know about that. Like,
Messmer isn't the only child of Marika cursed with unwelcome
I mean, the problem I have with this argument is that like Messmer's crusade is very much known about, at least by the nobility and stuff, because they're literally kicking people out for trying to get involved. It's like, why are you getting involved with this? Clearly, they at least have some idea of who Messmer is, what they're doing, like all the implications and things surrounding it. This idea, like, oh, it's this big dark age. I don't know if I can believe that. Like this, we don't know a lot about this stuff. Well, do we or do we not? I don't know. I haven't done the deep dive on that stuff. Like maybe there's a lot more that we know than Vati's giving credit for, right? Yeah. It feels weird to me to just to kind of like, go with this idea that like, oh, we don't know much about something, therefore it must come from a dark age, versus maybe that the devs are trying not to give too much away because otherwise it'd be too obvious, right? Or something like that, right? I don't know. I feel like if we're talking about whether Messmer is born early or not, again, Age of Plenty, sure. This also goes down into how long you want to say the Age of Plenty was. Was it hundreds of years, decades, like what have you, right? Like at the very least, Messmer has to be like at least a young man when he's going into the Realm of Shadow. So it's been at least like, I would say like 2 decades or so, at least, right? I think that's fair to put it. But again, it could be that based on gods and demigods and all this stuff, they could be living for hundreds of years for all we know. So how long was this Age of Plenty? Was there like a really wide period where he could have been born among so many other demigods? Because again, we see with the Wandering Mausoleums, there's a lot of demigods. So like, it's, I don't know. I'd really be curious if Vati has like a very specific idea where he thinks is most likely based on everything he's analyzed here, or if he's just kind of feeling like, you know what, this is the best I got on this.
Many of Marika's other children with Radagon too appear to have been suitable hosts. The clearest example of this is Melania, who was inhabited at birth by the outer god.
Actually, this is a good point to put.
And
again, the problem with the problem what happens with people in item descriptions is that a lot of times they feel like the item description, like the way they immediately read the item description is the only way that that not only can it be read, but that it should be read or something. And you have to be careful about that. This is true for any type of analysis of a text. Is you have to try to understand the authorial intent and what is the author trying to convey, not what the words you see and how you read those things are. Because there could be context, there could be other ways of looking at it, right? Sometimes people get very stringent on how exactly something should be read, and that can lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations, and then extrapolations from those misinterpretations that cause so many problems. And this happens in so many circles, religious, political, literary, right? Like it's something that is very important that, you don't think that the only truth is always the first truth that you come to the conclusion about for it, right? That you have to at least be kind of flexible in understanding, okay, is there something that I may be missing in terms of what it's meaning? Again, going back to that first Elden Lord thing. Okay, he's talking about the first Elden Lord. Okay, well that can't be, true in the strictest sense of, oh, first Elden Lord refers to first Elden Lord ever to exist in the lands between. Well, the text doesn't actually say that, and that's the thing. The text is just saying first Elden Lord, and you have to kind of pick up the context. What does first mean, right? And this is always a problem with From Software games specifically, that there's always that first oftentimes has an asterisk to it. Gehrman is the first hunter. Well, if you ignore those in Cainhurst, and those in the Tombs of the Gods underneath Yharnam, and probably also Yharnam itself in some of its early history, and also going back even deeper all the way back to Loran and and like there's been plenty of hunters before Gehrman. But it's very obvious to anyone playing the game that no, it's not trying to say that Gehrman existed since like the beginning of time when hunters first came around. It's just referring to the idea that he is the first hunter in the context of Yharnam for this era of the timeline. Yep, text is a very big thing. Yes, that is the point, is that it's very easy for people to run into where, the way they read the text and they instantly decipher that text to mean is therefore what it actually means. And you have to be careful about that, right? That's why it's very important to understand the Japanese script, because the Japanese script might word things that the localization maybe didn't pick up on, or maybe they didn't accurately, convey in the English language or something like that, or maybe something that couldn't be translated was lost in nuance, right? Because those things can end up affecting the way that a cold reading of the text might look at it, right? If you do a dispassionate read of this and you might be like, okay, well, this reads some way, but there may be some nuance that's lost there, that could really affect what your understanding is. And that's why, again, it's very important to understand all of those things. I was just saying that Mesmer's Spear has Smith script qualities, and that was the style in which it was remade specifically. Again, I'm totally okay with that, Xavier. Again, like I said, I don't have the text in front of me, so I don't even know what the word for remade specifically is off the top of my head. Like, again, I have not looked at Mesmer's stuff in a hot minute. Romina made Scarlet Raw. Yes, exactly. Stuff like that, right? Very much so. It's very, again, this is again, it's true for many things, but you have to be careful because this happens in the context of history, happens in the context of religion, happens in the context of so many things that, you have to make sure that you're understanding properly what the text is before you try to extrapolate meanings or validity or whatever to that text. Because sometimes you're ascribing meaning, which the text is actually saying, or even implying necessarily, and that can be the one where it's the source of many problems. Anyway, let's go back a little bit and listen to what Vati's trying to get at with Melania.
Appear to have been suitable hosts. The clearest example of this is Melania, who was inhabited at birth by the outer god of Rot.
Okay,
and
fair.
Her lore seems to suggest that being the child of a single god is the precursor for this phenomenon where they can be inhabited or cursed. It's as if these children are born more vulnerable than others. And it's as if Marika is...
So this is another good point to make. If Mesmer is possessed by an outer god of some sort, and that outer god is the reason for his powers or something like that, that could bolster the claim to a Marika Radagon union, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, this only happens when you're born from a singular god. Now, I have some issues with this. Because again, both Melania and Miquella also are Empyreans. Again, I said it before, you could make the argument maybe that Mesmer is also there, but I personally would not go that far, right? And you also have arguments for, of course, Ranni being, Ranni is an Empyrean, but no one would argue that Ranni is a child of Radagon, right? Or, well, sorry, a child of Radagon with Marika, right? I don't think Radagon's, Radagon's having Marika bear his Queenie's child or anything like that for sure. So and she's also an Empyrean. So, like, are we trying to say that the Empyrean status and the selection process there and the outer god possession are separate? Because I'm then curious then, why isn't Mesmer considered an Empyrean if he's possessed by an outer god the same as Melania and Miquella are? And that would be part of the criteria, right? Like, I'm curious where Vati thinks about this entire Empyrean selection scenario here. Also, the fact that obviously Melania doesn't seem to be born that way, and she also becomes an Empyrean stuff, right? So, like, yeah, there's a lot of questions I have there. Alrighty. I think this is a good video, by the way. Like, in terms of, like, actually interesting and thought-provoking. Like, again, I disagree with a lot of the points here that are being made. But in terms of, like, I like the way it's framing it and where it's going with it so far. So we'll see how it pans out, because this is a long
able
one.
to put this vulnerability to use sometimes. A great example of that is Melina, who I'd hazard is an incarnation of a certain Glomide queen.
Okay, yep, I would agree with this.
Since Marika is said to have defeated the Glomide queen, Melina's existence may have been a deliberate act, with Marika allowing her enemy to be reborn within her own child. Perhaps as a means of wielding the fire within
so
her.
Vati goes with this idea that Melina is... so the Glomide Queen is a separate character, essentially, but Melina is like a reincarnation type scenario where, for whatever reason, the soul of her enemy goes in. Now, I don't actually buy this. I think Melina just is the Glomide Queen, right? Now, again, you could argue about her memories and how much she remembers or stuff like that. Again, I'm not opposed to this reincarnation idea, like prima facie, right? I understand why people have that. I just don't think, based on what we got, that's actually the case. I think it really very much is. No, Melina and Mesmer both are born are both born to her, and then Melina ends up going on to beat Glowmite and gets defeated and all that stuff. It also becomes this thing because, again, we have that also happens after the giant war with the Glowmite Queen stuff, right? With the whole the fire monks who end up defecting to the Glowmite Queen side for this conflict and stuff like that with the Godskins. You also have on top of that just the general fact that, like, the only candidates for Godskins are demigods. So, like, again, is the argument then being that there was this incident with the Glowmite Queen? You just randomly had this woman who becomes Empyrean, and then this Glowmite Queen, and maybe he's going to connect it back to the snake and stuff like that in the village. But is the argument then that this Glowmite Queen goes over and how do you say it? Like, she goes over after Marika's established her kingdom during this age of plenty, decides to kill them all. Then Marika ends up having her slain, but then decides she's gonna reincarnate her into there. What's the purpose of that, right? Like, I don't see what benefit Marika gets by bringing her enemy back to life. Like, we don't have any indication or reference to Empyreans reincarnating or anything before this point, right? Unless the argument is that the Empyrean status is conferred with the outer gods coming in, and then the outer gods are like former gods and this former Empyrean, right? Like, there's that line of reasoning too. But unless Vati's trying to allude to this, I don't see where Marika's being like, well, she's gonna get reincarnated as an Empyrean in the future anyway, so I'm gonna have it done early and then hide her away, or I don't know there. Let's see.
A purpose by Marika to burn down the Erd Tree. Incidentally, Messmer too bore a vision of fire, and like Melina, the fire...
This is actually a good question. It's like, what was Marika's intent with Melina and the fire and stuff like that? I don't think you can make the argument that that is why Melina necessarily came to be, assuming that is. Like, I could see it just being her wanting her daughter back, but not wanting any of the evil, corrupting influence that turned her daughter into her enemy or whatever, right? I could just see it as Marika trying to bring her back, but then, like, obviously there's some of the stuff with the flames and things like that, and she's like, okay, well, I can't really separate that from you, so you're going to be in hiding, but I still love you and stuff. I'm just going to keep you hidden from the world and keep you separate so you don't burn down my precious Erd Tree. Like, I don't see a scenario where the idea is that Melina was created, right, with the soul of the Glowmite Queen for the express purpose of burning down the Erd Tree in the future. You could argue maybe that's what her goal for her became after shattering the Elden Ring itself and becoming imprisoned. Like, she did some communication thing that made Melina aware of this and then decide she would leave with this mission from her mother. I could believe that. I don't think the idea, again, this goes back to the whole, like, Marika planned everything from the beginning. I really don't think so. I think Marika's really winging these things. It doesn't look like this very, this is, like, tightly made conspiracy that she's been, like, pulling the strings for. Like, I'm sorry, I love Marika, but I think it's giving her a little too much credit.
Within Messmer was fated to incinerate a significant tree. Perhaps Marika had learned from Messmer just what birthing other entities into her children could be used to accomplish. But I digress.
Okay.
It's currently unclear whether Marika knew that Messmer would be cursed from birth, but cursed he was.
Yes, he was.
Cursed to harbor both a wicked serpent and a kindling that would not be extinguished.
Okay.
The serpent in particular filled Marika with such terror that she plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. Even so...
Here's a good question about this. Did this happen? When did this happen exactly? Well, because obviously, like, little baby Messmer, I'm not that familiar with human anatomy, chap, but I believe that eyes grow along with the body. So, like, did they have to update the eyeball? If Vati's implying that, like, this happened, like is this supposed to happen when he was first born, or is this something where it's, like, down the line? Because I always thought it was for after the Glowmite Queen incident. Marika's like, okay, I can't deal with you being like this, so you need to wear this eyeball now. Like, I always figured it was a later thing, right? But I honestly haven't thought about the idea that, okay, well, maybe since he was very born, Marika was so terrified of this that she felt the need to seal him this way. I find this a very interesting idea. Again, like I said, I may not necessarily agree with everything Vati's saying, but he's asking some very interesting questions about, okay, well, when exactly did this happen? Could this go as early as his birth?
Her fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow.
Okay, and this is again part of the reason I'm like, I think that this might have to occur later. I don't think her fear of her child was intrinsically like to this extent until much later. Unless Vati's gonna make the argument that Marika had Messmer grow up in there, which again would step on his whole Radon thing as well. So I hesitate to think he's gonna go that far with that. But like, Also, we're not even 10 minutes in, by the way, and we've been here for a while.
There is no law that talks directly about how or why, or even if the malevolent snake was his curse, but the lore surrounding such serpents is fascinating. So let's talk about that and compare these other serpents to Messmer.
Ooh, good. I actually
Both
like this.
The Serpent Hunter and the Serpent God's curved sword speak of an immortal serpent deity
getting some Gelmir
that once
lore
existed
in this video.
in the distant
Cool.
past,
I like this.
worshipped through sacrifice in a long-forgotten religion. A god so feared that a special weapon was forged to hunt it, and what appears to be this same serpent is what eventually devours Rykard, becoming one with him. Now, Messmer's serpent is physiologically different from the Great Serpent, but there are still some very noteworthy similarities
I think everything
between
else should be
the
the
two.
same in this cutscene.
Like Rykard's, Messmer's serpent still displays that same propensity to devour the world, stretching its maw over a giant orb, a visual that mirrors the world-devouring serpent depicted upon the Devourer's scepter. So
Maybe
perhaps
I could.
there is
Okay.
not just one undying serpent.
Maybe
but
it could also
many.
just be, attack,
After
because
all,
spheres are,
Rykard's
a good
concept
way to show
art
like
shows
attack
two
balls coming from
unbroken
mouths and
eggs
stuff.
beside the broken shell of the Great Serpent, a hint perhaps that others were yet to hatch. And as Rykard himself says, it's not the serpent that never dies, but a serpent never dies, suggesting the immortal Great Serpent was not the only one of its kind.
Again, it depends
But
on
what
how
else
you read
connects
his
this
JP text.
ancient
It could go
Great
either way,
Serpent
from what I
to
remember.
Messmer? Well, we also see winged serpent statues
I
throughout
don't know if I
Gelmir,
would say this is
which
true for all
could
serpents.
suggest a connection to Messmer's own, and upon the peak, we find snakes embellishing an ancient artifact of the giants.
Is that a snake or is that a
Time serpents to
dragon?
The Fell God and his flame,
Legit
which
question.
could
It reminds me
conceivably
of, like,
be
Norse
the
dragon
same
depictions.
flame within Messmer. And that's a very interesting theory I want to discuss.
Okay.
As a reminder, the Fell God is the entity that lurked within the fire giants, and sometimes
There are
even
connections
within
between the Fell
fire
God and
itself.
Gelmir, so this might
Its
be a good,
fire is able
worthwhile,
to burn the Erd
this
tree,
worthwhile
so
discussion.
unsurprisingly, it was painted as corrupt and malformed by Queen Marika's regime. The one-eyed shield actually goes so far as to say that it's believed Queen Marika killed this evil deity, but that's probably just another example of Golden Order propaganda. The Fell God inhabits the last fire giant when we fight it, so it clearly still lives on, slowly obsessing.
Well, it lives. Okay, so let
example of
me
killed
be sure about
this
this
evil
exact.
deity, but that's
Okay, so yeah, they say believed here in the text itself to confirm, right? I don't remember if they talk about it being destroyed like without the qualifier in other descriptions, right? But yeah, we do. This is very obvious. Like, yes, they say, okay, Fell God has been well and truly slain. Well, clearly it's been slain in a bunch of the giants, but it's not been fully slain. Now, I don't know what it means to keep one giant alive after killing the others. Like, what is supposed to happen if you killed the last giant? The Fell God would be free or something like that. Like, I don't understand. Like, what is the argument for keeping it alive beyond there's no point in killing them all because it's still going to exist. It's not going to disappear or whatever from the forge, maybe, and therefore let's instead repurpose this last giant for our as a guardian to keep it locked away so no one will actually touch it because we're not going to be able to actually get rid of that formally. Maybe that's the argument. Though then I would ask questions like, why not just like knock the cauldron into the ocean or something and let it sink to the bottom or whatever? Like, again, there are a lot of questions I would have about how this is exactly supposed to work with the giants, but that's neither here nor there.
probably just another example of Golden Order propaganda.
Dragon definitely.
The
You think
Fell
so,
God
too?
inhabits the last fire giant when we fight it, so it clearly still lives on, slowly obsessing the minds of the fire monks, who were tasked with watching over its flame of
All right.
ruin.
Fair enough.
So it's curious that there are snakes embellishing this ancient bowl of the Fell God's fire, but there's more to connect snakes to the Fell God. So the giant's flame incantations of the fire monks, you may recall, have really distinct names: O Flame, Whirl O Flame, Burn O Flame, Surge O Flame.
Yeah.
This is a common pattern among the incantations of the fire monks, and curiously, this same naming scheme is also present on the serpent flail, a weapon intended to burn Hornsent with coiled snakes, branding them.
All right, but would you say that that's a direct connection to fire monks, or just because it comes from the same America culture, or even more broadly because it's about flame pyromancies? God, I'm so Dark Souls pilled right now. Flame pyromancies in general, right? I would hesitate to make a deep connection. I would hesitate to look too deeply into that. You know, like maybe there's something there. It's possible for sure. I just don't know how much I would actually want to actually buy that, you know? I think we should go more for damage. I think damage is most important to us right now. Anyway. The whole naming convention there, like, I get what he wants to go with that, but it's like, the thing is that, like, when you have fire stuff and you see it traditionally used with, like, fire giants and things, but there's a lot, like, I think the only ones that might not follow this convention is maybe some of the prophet stuff, but I don't remember right now. And maybe the prophet stuff also kind of goes with this kind of naming convention thing. So it might just be a thing with fire in general, to just invoke flame. So I don't know. I don't know if I would really want to ascribe anything too deeply there.
With agony and fear. Its description says nothing about the Fell God, but its skill is named Flare, O Serpent, echoing the incantations of the Fell God's flame.
Okay.
It's an impressive piece of storytelling to hide a connection to the Fell God in the name of a weapon skill, of all things. Credit to user Call Me Claire for making me...
Well, okay, so then my question would be, okay, if there's a connection to Fell God, where's the Abyss come from then? Because the Abyss is in those flames, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know, Vati. I don't know if this is really the connection to make there between the Fell God and Messmer here. Unless you have a really good argument for what the Abyss is separate from that. And again, this goes back to my point about, like, the red hair and stuff like that. Like, with Melina, I'd say, okay, it's not really Radigan's signature hair color, so you'd have to make a few arguments on why that may be slightly different, and there's tons of justifications for that, don't get me wrong. With Messmer, though, I would say, well, why can't his hair color be because of this flame? Because, again, you see red hair, again, if you're going with this Fell God connection, well, we see how using the Fell God's flame changes the hair color of the fire monks and stuff like that. Like, that's a common feature, right? Of devotion to the... devotion of your faith to the flame results in something like this. So if that's the case, why don't we see that more commonly with Messmer soldiers who use his flame, or again, like what we see with Messmer himself? Maybe that's the source of his actual red hair, right? And again, I wouldn't even argue for the Fell God connection. I would just say this could just be a thing when you're just getting too deep into the fire stuff. It just turns your hair red. Only Giant's Flame. Okay, so it is just the Giant's Flame stuff at least. Okay, so there's at least that going for it. Yeah, I would doubt it too, but, like, at least that's something there, right? I just wasn't sure because it was like, he's not mentioning the prophet stuff, so I couldn't remember if that was actually the case where, okay, is he forgetting it, or is it, like, is that actually not there? Okay.
Amazing discovery.
All right,
so
let's see.
Is there still any doubt that Messmer has a connection to the Fell God of Fire?
Yes.
Messmer's flame does manifest as an orb, not unlike the literal flame of the Fell God.
Yeah, but look at the... Vati. They're very different orbs. You see, this orb, that's got the nice fiery thing. You could argue, okay, well, maybe that's a little bit... But it's got this little black darkness stuff going into there. You know? It's not just like... It's not like, oh, look, it's one into shame. Right? And again, the idea... Again, the hinging it on the orb thing, I don't think this is a good... Again, like... Fireballs are the most generic magic that have ever been conceptualized by mankind. Like, if you're gonna shoot fire, of course you're gonna have a fireball. So I don't know if this, like, again, I was like, okay, maybe with the snake and the world thing, I can kind of see where you're going with this, but, like, if we're now making the case, well, okay, well, the fire and the orb be, gonna be harder pressed. But does it carry over to the JP? Again, that I do not remember. I don't recall there being any weirdness with how the JP spell names were done. Like, I thought the localization was pretty consistent with that. But again, maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't remember. I really don't.
Messmer's furnace golems, too, were designed to evoke it. Their masks are surrounded by code.
Now, again, this is true. This is very much true. But we also have to remember, this is not the important line here, Vati. This is. Now, maybe he's going to bring this up as a qualificator. Like, okay, this may be unrelated. But, like, the fact that they're trying to essentially intimidate the Hornsent by depicting a god who they despise, for whatever the reasons are. Like, let's put the reasons for that aside. The fact that you're depicting it where you have the face, and it's the face with the horns of the Hornsent, but it's in the form of the fell god, like, sun look to it. I think that's something significant.
Old horns, depicting the fell god of fire that haunts the sagas.
Technically,
of the
Midra has
Hornsent.
similar effects for a move as the flame
This
of the
was
fell
an
god, so it must be
intentional
connected.
act
Yeah,
of
that's the
terror
problem I
by
have with
Messmer
this. Is
to
there's
mimic the visage of a god.
I think this
that
is
the
a
Hornsent
very
feared
mistaken
in the form of
avenue to
these
go down.
walking furnaces. Sure, this could have been nothing more than a strategy to terrorize his foes.
Okay, he's
but
acknowledging
it feels so significant that it's Messmer and his flame that brings these avatars of the fell god
Again,
and
I would-
its furnaces to life.
I would not go that far.
I just wish we knew more about these Hornsent sagas that spoke of the fell god. The lore
Well-
on this topic is just so tantalizing.
All right, so here's my take. Whenever it comes to legends or something, usually there's nothing much deeper than there. The important thing is the fact that whatever these legends speak of, they invoke the fear of it, and you can reverse engineer from that. Okay, well, why are they fear? Well, what does the fell god stand for? What do the Hornsent stand for? Where could there be issues of disagreement between them? Okay, that's probably what the legends say, right? Like, again, I think that more work could be done on this. I do. I think that if you want to. Because what he's actually saying is he's trying to add a lot of fell god lore to Messmer, and it feels like, okay, well, what about the connection between Messmer and the Messmer and the Hornsent and the fell god then, right? Because again, like he said, this could just be terrifying, and the idea that it's Messmer doesn't really mean much because again, Messmer is also part of Marika's kingdom. Marika's the one who ordered Mesmer's crusade. Marika hates the fell god herself. Of course, she knows that, hey, this is gonna really freak out the Hornsent because they hate the fell god. They hate the fell god like me. So like, there's a lot here I'd have to think about. There are too many types of fire in Elden Ring, so I can see why people are trying to group them up. Yeah, I understand the feeling of, okay, let's try to simplify the amount of flames in here and try to find it. I just don't think this is the argument for it. Like, we're arguing that, well, they both have fireballs, therefore fell god. That's not a good piece of evidence. Even in a cumulative case, I would be like, okay, this seems like you just throw that out because it's completely incidental. Like, there's no real value to making that argument there, right? And then we have the flail. Okay, maybe there's something there. Now we got the whole thing terrifying the Hornsent with that. I'm like, maybe as a side, but like, it's really weak. I wonder how them worshipping the mother of all crucible on giants but are enemies of the fell god works out. Again, I've always made the case that I'm not sure those are the same giants as the fire giants, right? If you want to go full down deep into the sauce, you can even make an argument that the fact that they're not specified as fire giants is the important thing, and maybe there's other types of giants or something. I don't know if I'd necessarily go there, but let's get back to this vid and listen.
It's just enough for us to start forming theories, but it's not enough for us to land on any one in particular.
Again,
But there is a fascinating...
Again, I hazard a guess that I would disagree if I was doing a deep dive on this. Because at some point, what happens is you have theories, but you also have likely theories. And I don't think the fell god connection is a likely theory, right? Like, believe me, I said you could have a theory where Gwyn rode into the Kiln of the First Flame on an invisible pink unicorn. That is certainly a theory, but you cannot say that it is a likely theory, and I think many would hazard to say that it is a possible theory, that I'm being facetious in saying this, because there's absolutely zero basis with which to come up with such a theory, right? Like, at some point you have to accept that, okay, there's evidence, but not all evidence is necessarily equal, not all analysis of that evidence is necessarily equal, and therefore not all theories are necessarily equal. And when you start cutting through the chaff, eventually you're going to find that there is maybe one or two very good or likely possibilities to work with, and those could be limited even further when you go through the rest of the scenario. We're like, okay, let's go with the assumption that this scenario is true, let's go with the assumption this scenario too. Which one's the one that's causing more problems down the line with everything else, right? So, like, again, I don't like this mindset of, oh, well, there's just a bunch of theories, it's giving us a little bit, but we can work for it. Again, this isn't a specifically a Vati thing that I'm talking about. I think that, in general, I much prefer from my content creators, if they just give me their take. Right or wrong, I much respect them just sort of giving me the idea of this is where they see the truth, and they have the confidence to argue it because, again, they think that it is the truth, the true narrative there. And all the evidence and stuff is to argue on why they believe this is the truth and trying to make the case for you to share in their belief, right? I think
the
that's
story being teased here of
I think that's
fell
reasonable.
flame and serpent gods that could conceivably have crossed paths with Marika and played a part in Messmer's birth, but how you imagine that story is up to you. For now.
They
announce Elden Ring 2 already? But back to what
No,
we know for
please
certain.
no.
What we know is that
I don't need to add another
serpents
decade
had
of my
an
life
extremely
studying
ill
this stuff.
reputation in the age of the Erd Tree, to the point where in the arena, gladiators would be adorned with bronze snakes for the audience delighted in seeing these bronze effigies beaten and battered. Whether this hatred was justified or manufactured by the Erd Tree's order is unknown, but it must have surely shaped Mesmer's life. His snakes wouldn't exactly have been easy to hide. Sure, they're not visible.
I would agree with this, except I would also say that I don't think that Mesmer would have any issues of this for long, because he'd be going to the realm of shadow very shortly after this. Again, maybe you could argue it would take a few years or something, so maybe this could still be an effect on him, especially considering the behavior for recruitment that happened when it came to the Crusade and stuff like that. But I would say that I'd say that there isn't really much to talk about him psychologically with the snakes, as if, oh no, he grew up his whole life having to deal with this stigma against serpents that was on him, and he had these obvious serpents on him, right? Like, I don't even think the good serpent, quote unquote, was necessarily part of him until possibly later in his life, maybe even, right? Like, I could see a scenario where he just lived with this abyssal serpent, and then the good serpent got brought in from Gelmir, like they worked it in. Now, how exactly it's the good serpent, all that stuff, that's a good mystery that we maybe want to explore, right? But I doubt that Mesmer is going to be affected by this, because as I said before, I think the Glowmite Queen incident is the entire foundation for the Crusade. It's, again, Marika, from all indications, does not seem to care about what's going on with the Hornsent or crusading against them or the Gate of Divinity or anything, which is obvious. Like, again, the whole shrouding the Tower of Divinity, everything. Like, clearly that's what Mesmer is really there for. It's to make sure that the Gate of Divinity isn't accessed by any other Empyreans like the Glowmite Queen. So it's very clear that Marika does not really have any concerns about any of this stuff until there's someone who comes to challenge her power, and that is Melina, the Glowmite Queen. So, again, the fact that Mesmer is connected to Gelmir, the snakes, and Melina would be a good justification for him to face some discrimination or prejudice from people, but I don't think that by itself would be the issue. I think the bigger issue would be the Abyssal Flame stuff. Like, I feel like if there's anything that was like, ah, man, this was a huge shitty part of Mesmer's life, I think it'd be the Abyssal Flames, the potential to burn the Erd Tree, or their connection to something that isn't gold or whatever, or shadow or something, right? Not the serpents themselves. Because I don't think there was a lot of time for that prejudice to really affect him. Now, again, probably did exist and might have contributed to stuff, but I think there's probably a lot more going into Mesmer than just that in his lifetime. I think it's at most a few years of him having to deal with that, but by then he gets an entire army, and then he goes into the realm of shadow, and he's never gonna have to deal with that again. Well, until, people find out about the other, about the bigger problem, which is the Abyssal Serpent. It's like, okay, yeah, he's got some serpent connection. He's got the big, serpent coming out of his body, but that's fine. But then the big scary actual, oh, you're like a snake. You're like, you got snakiness all the way down to your core. Okay, now we've got an issue.
On the statue of him as a baby, but Mesmer's helm makes it clear that the
Loki would rather get into Duskblood's lore and learn about romantic vampires. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to cover Duskblood's lore, but I won't say I'm intrigued. I'm willing to at least contribute to like some of the translation stuff, even if I don't want to do like analysis for it, kind of like what I did for Elden Ring at first. And then we'll see if the lore of the game like intrigues me enough to really drag me down. But like, I don't know. Like, the fact that I'm probably not going to actually play it as a game is really hurting the chances. But we'll see. Maybe I'll really love Night Rain, and then I'll really want to try Duskblood's combat.
winged snakes in particular were his constant companions, wise friends.
Him being sickly and maybe being averse to sunlight was probably sucky too. I don't remember exactly if he's described as sickly. I think he's described as like lanky and frail, maybe. So maybe that would be the idea. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look because I don't remember. Again, I haven't looked at Mesmer's stuff for a very long time, so I could be misremembering some
the
details.
base serpent at bay.
Yep.
That would have been a crucial role, especially before Marika sealed the base serpent away with her grace.
Yeah, the question would be, when did that happen? I'd actually be very curious for you to examine that possibility. When
to
did
be
that...
morally low or despicable. This
Yeah.
is probably in reference to the serpent's desire and its propensity to endlessly.
Again, generally speaking, as I recall, the term for base is specifically referring to the idea of wickedness and stuff. So this is like an evil serpent. It's also a term you see a lot when you're talking about like an evil or a false god. You'll see that a lot, right? Like a fell god, you could say. But yeah, I recall it being like talked about like specifically this idea of being like this wicked serpent. So you have the good serpent and then you have the evil serpent, like the good and the bad. That seems to be the idea.
Devour. The base
He
serpent
really loves that
thus
that
stands in
B-roll of
contrast
the
to the
of
winged
the serpent with the fire
serpents,
orb
which
thing.
are benevolent by comparison. We get the briefest glimpse of the base serpent behind Messmer's eye. It appears to be knotted, visually similar to the knot that Rykard's great serpent forms. And in that dark hollow, it's
I'm
feeding
blind.
on something. Messmer's kindling, a dark thing eaten away at by a wicked serpent. We know a few things about this fire. First, it's ever burning, not unlike the giant's flame. Second, it can burn the sealing tree. Third, it ties Messmer to Melina, who shares a similarly burning butterfly and kindling that is similarly capable of burning the Erd tree. If I had to guess, it's this ever-burning flame that has caused Messmer's eternity of suffering, and Messmer's orb
Oh, so we're
reads,
really-
Messmer despised his own fire. Time and time
Oh,
again,
so we're really
he
focused
hoped
on that
to rid
eternity
himself
aspect,
of
huh?
it, but ever did it burn. Time and time again, he hoped to rid himself of it. So wait, what exactly was Messmer doing to rid himself of his flame?
Well, that's
I
a good
wonder,
question.
is it possible that in an attempt to rid himself of his fire, Messmer could have fed his kindling to the base serpent? This spell
damn.
does depict the orb that's inside of the serpent's maw, so I wonder if there could be a story being told here. The story of a dark serpent that consumed Messmer's essence, not unlike the great serpent that consumed Rykard, and became one with him.
Interesting idea.
Indeed, Messmer and the base serpent are one entity, as you can see in Phase 2 of his boss fight.
Yeah, they make
Look closely
they make a point
and
of that for
you'll
sure.
notice that the snake shares his greasy red hair and that same savaged right eye.
Oh, come
Under
on.
this interpretation, the serpent
you,
would
Vati,
not have
this
freed
guy.
him from his flame.
Asshole.
Instead, Messmer's fire would have become serpentine, attaining those serpentine black streaks from the abyssal serpent that had become one with him. But to be clear, this is just speculation. It's
Alright.
entirely possible that Messmer was just born with the twin snakes and
Oh.
born with the abyssal serpent
Fuck
and
yeah.
his kindling all together. Without learning the circumstances of his birth, we may never know for sure.
Well,
At some point, Messmer
Well-
tried to offer his
I would say, wouldn't this be the good idea to do for the analysis? What are the circumstances of his birth, right? Like we're trying. I would like a little more commitment here. Okay, well, it looks like he's probably being born from Radigan. Okay, well, when is he gonna be born? Well, we don't really know. There's a lot of variability. Okay, well, when do you think that this happens? This feels to me like Vati doesn't have a strong grasp on all the surrounding things outside of Messmer, and therefore he's really struggling to narrow it down because he doesn't, everything's kind of like this fluid idea of where everything is in the timeline. It could be here, it could be there, it could be here. Well, where do you think, after all you've done and all the videos you've come out with and all the stuff that you've done on this, where would you nail it down and stuff like that, right? That's where I would really want to. That's why I would really love to hear from you, Vati, on this stuff. I've talked with him. I get to hear a lot of his ideas, a lot of his points, where he thinks of things and go to it, right? I would love to see a bit more of that here on this here. Hopefully, Night Rain will contain some applicable lore. I think it is. I just don't know how far and how deep down the rabbit hole we're gonna go on this stuff, right? Again, I love seeing the Draconic Tree Sentinel do the Placky Stormcloud move right after I come out with an analysis that basically infers hey, it looks like Grand Sax is Placky's son. It's like, oh wow, the Draconic Tree Sentinels, which got their armor by infusing it with pieces of Grand Sax's body, are now doing a Placky move. It's like, oh wow, geez. I wonder what that is implying. So I very much think we're gonna get stuff. I just don't know how major it's gonna be. Maybe the final boss is gonna be crazy as we're gonna find the final Night Lord. It's gonna be some crazy lore reveal or something. I could totally see that. Like I said, I would laugh so hard if it's yes, this is where Godwin's soul went off to. Was it destroyed eternally? It actually became merged with Ronnie's body and became this weird disfigured monstrosity or something like. I'd have so much fun with something like that. I'd be like. Oh, fun. It looks like Messmer actually has his holy resistance lowered to 0 in his second phase. That's cool. That's a cool little detail, if true. Alright.
serpentine fire to his knights, but alas, it would not find purchase within them. I think this
It
phrasing
can't be connected
is
to the
deliberate,
shadow of the
since
gold, then, I would say,
finding
if that's the
purchase
case. It has to be
within
its own
is
thing.
wording that Tanith also uses when she wishes that the Serpentine Rykard would find purchase within her.
Oh,
Dear Rykard.
again, I don't have the text in front of me to say. I'm going to guess, though, that's a localization decision and not necessarily reflective of the actual terminology used there. Again, I could be wrong. I could be checking. There's actually, like, this term is only used in these 2 cases, and it's specifically localized as purchase there because they picked up on something there. I don't remember that being the case, though. But again, it could be something I overlooked.
God, please find purchase within me.
I get wacky with it for
Since
the
it would
spin-off.
not inhabit them, Messmer's knights honored their bond with him by incanting his flame instead. This serpentine fire bends and curls in pursuit of its foes, evoking other pursuit spells like Death Rancor or Hexes from the Souls series. Pursuit spells such as these are typically alive in some way, whether they're vengeful spirits or
Hey, buddy.
dregs drawn to life. Messmer's embers were found all over after the crusade, and they were smouldering as if crawling across the ground. So
Oh,
his
come
fire
on!
really does appear to be alive. So alive, in fact, that it can actually substitute the role of a spirit calculus and
Damn.
fit inside a raw burrow to release
We're gonna have to
a
come back later,
boisterous
this guy.
fire sprite. The spirituality of this fire is what led an elder of the Fire Knights, a man named Wago, to use Messmer's flame in a rite of resurrection.
Now, I think this is a really good point. Is like, okay, could there be a deeper connection here between what we see with the Hornsen spirituality stuff and this abyss thing that's going on with Messmer's flame? Because yeah, we see a lot of like for lack of a better word, zombies being created using Messmer's flame. There seems to very much be a living aspect to it, and yet at the same time, like Xavier was pointing out earlier, there's no holy resistance for Messmer when he's using this power so explicitly. When he embraces the base serpent, which is supposed to be the source of this like abyssal power, it seems to be completely different from the kind of shadow, which is, the other side of gold and therefore just as holy, right? So there's something here that I think is really cool to examine.
Soulless
Let's listen
bodies
more.
to life.
Fire, take seed in death and rise again.
This was done in a bid to quell his loneliness, but the walking corpses were of no comfort to the poor man. Interestingly, no lore mentions Marika fearing Messmer's fire. Rather, it only mentions that she fears the malevolent snake. She
Well, it's the
so
snake,
feared
serpent
it
of
that
the
she plucked
That's the
out her
question,
son's
right?
own eye. And
So it's the
replaced
argument
it
that
with
you
a
have
seal
Fel
of
God, but then the
grace
snake is separate from
instead.
the Fel God.
Yet, even having done so, her fear still compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow where he could be hidden. The seal of grace given to Messmer is a sort of crystal eye engraved with Marika's own Elden rune. It's essentially identical to Marika's Saw seal, which has a description that's particularly relevant to Messmer and his role in the realm of shadow. That reads, "Solemn duty weighs upon the one beholden, not unlike a gnawing curse from which there is no
Oh my god, that is so dumb.
These seals represent the lifelong duty of those chosen by the gods. And to a degree, this seal appears to exert an influence over Messmer, for it's only when he shatters it that he lets forth his true feelings.
Uh-huh.
Mother, Marika, a curse upon thee.
Personally, I would blame that more on him
Brilliance
being
of
dead
Queen
here.
Marika's grace blinds
Honestly, I don't
even
think
the
there's
very
any like
best,
seal on
after
him
all.
saying this to his mother before.
Similar
It's
to
just he's
Messmer's
trying,
eye
you know,
is
he's
the
trying to be a
Iris
good
of
boy.
Grace, an item that you can
Personally.
find in-game. It features Marika's rune overlaid with an incantation of the Erd Tree, granting a fleeting blessing when placed upon the eye. Its counterpart is the Iris of Occlusion, something that can deny one light in all its forms. In the realm of shadow, these artifices were employed by the priests of the Erd Tree to quell or intensify the fears of their flock to magnificent effect.
Thank you.
And speaking of the priests of the
Asshole.
Erd Tree, we've heard of them before. The Flask of Wondrous
Uh-huh.
Physic is described as a relic of these same priests,
Okay.
who are said to have been physic chemists,
Well,
utilizing in their brews crystal dew that would
now
weep.
again, as I point out to them, that they're perfumers. They are, they are like, when they're talking about like this whole physic chemist thing, it's like, yeah, they're talking about like apothecaries, right? which are the same thing as the terminal, the kanjis, the underlying kanji there's the same. They just have an extra one there to kind of, that they decide they're going to change up the whole term for. But it's very clear the idea is like, okay, these are just like high-ranking priests who are, having a very specialized duty, right?
From the boughs of minor oak trees. Marika herself practiced such physic chemistry, and her ultimate creation was the Blessing of Marika, the ultimate healing item. To Mesmer, who likely suffered thanks to the fire within him, these physics offered rare relief. For Marika once created several of these physics for Mesmer's sake.
Now, this is a good point to be made. Now, here's the question. Was this something from before his crusade or after it was about to get started? I could see it being from before his crusade, and then during the crusade, he starts handing them out to his soldiers because he stops using it. Because we find them in so many different places. Unless the argument is that Mesmer just dropped them, right? Like, the only thing I can think of is that, like, yeah, Marika gave it to him, but then he gave it to some of his men or something. Because otherwise, I don't know why we find them in random corpses outside of that, right? Like, don't we find it at, like, the Church of Benediction or something? Or was it Consolation? One of the two. What happened with Mesmer's other eye? I don't think I heard anyone discuss that. That's actually a good point. I don't know. What if the eye that he actually puts in is his eye, but they, they plucked it out, turned it into a seal, and then put it back in? Like, that would be an interesting idea. I guess you could also say it's not that important. You could have just crushed it and got rid of it, maybe. I don't know. That is an interesting angle to take it, though, for sure.
But then, never again. Presumably, this mercy ended when Mesmer was sealed away in the realm of shadow.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So perhaps
probably.
there was real affection between the two. For all of Marika's...
Yeah. Again, I go with this. I don't think that there was any issue with Marika fearing him so much that they had to pluck out his eye until later. I like everything points to this being where literally Marika was trying to, Marika, okay, she had two kids. One of them, Melina, was born with golden flames. The other one, Mesmer, was born with abyssal flames. Golden flames, okay, you're all good. We're not going to be too concerned with you, Melina. Well, Mesmer, you got these abyssal type flames. These aren't really holy. These are kind of like, I'm not really comfortable with these. So I'm going to go and like send you like over to like Gilmere or something, because maybe for some reason something involving Gilmere could be done about that. Because, it's a serpent, you got a serpent. We'll go to the serpent. Marika is allied with the serpents, obviously at this time, because that would be the best justification for how you get any Gilmere connection there, right? And it's like, okay, serpents, I'm entrusting you with my son. Through our relationship with my son, you end up meeting his sister. And through meeting his sister, you two start getting into, collaborate talks or whatever. And eventually, and again, this would probably, maybe if you want to make a speculation, maybe there's some, temptation by the devil type thing happening here between the serpent and Melina. But eventually, she gets onto this whole Glowmide Queen binge. And she ends up adopting Black Flames after taking the Rune of Death. Which again, very easy to see how a child of Marika, a member of the, a very close member of the royal court could end up being able to take this away without, anybody noticing, right? And being able to use it for herself. And then, of course, starts recruiting stuff. Now, you could also make a case that, okay, well, maybe Marika would still be concerned about the flames. Yeah, but that's where you get the Felgod connection in, because then you go to the Fire Monks. The Fire Monks are all about sealing flames and keeping flames or whatever. So while Mesmer's dealing with just the serpent aspect, Melina just has to worry about the fire aspect of hers, because again, no problems with the gold, and there doesn't seem to be anything like underlyingly wrong with her golden flames beyond that. All right, so we're just going to go jump over to the Fire Monks, and then, like, again, with Melina going back and forth between the Fire Monks, maybe Gelmir and something like that, you can kind of see how, okay, she can start converting some of those Fire Monks over to her side, and then they are disappearing with her back over into thing, and then all this stuff happening on Gelmir with the Godskins and all that, and bada bing, bada boom, we're where we're at. Let's see. I've interpreted as before, and his existence is painful. Yeah, I would agree with this. I think it's clear that his existence is painful because he has that serpent writhing inside of him. So it makes sense to me that if Marika is giving him divine blessings, that yeah, I think I agree with this. It's going to be probably before, because I never really thought about it, right? Like I never thought about, okay, when were these divine blessings given? Because then originally I would be like, okay, you kind of see him around and say, okay, gives the divine blessings. Well, maybe they could have been in the realm of shadow, but like I said, there's the problem of, okay, well, why do we find them on bodies if they're for Mesmer specifically? Now, if the idea is, okay, he has some of these, they don't really work, and he only has so many anyway, so may as well give them to his men instead. I could definitely see that being the case. See, I am learning stuff, chat. Like, this is, again, I think as someone who has not like gone too deep on the Mesmer things, like I have like a basic overview on stuff involving him, but I wouldn't consider myself like a Mesmer expert. I think this video is very good on at the very least getting your brain to think about these things and the possibilities, right? And maybe that's the goal, and that's why Vaati wants to frame it as kind of like, oh, we don't really know and do stuff like that. Again, my personal preference, if like I was making this video, if I was watching videos from other people, I'd like something a bit more firm and more solid on, you know, his specific thoughts and where he lands on every single issue, not just him like being like, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but like, yeah, that's me, not Vaati. And well, hey, look, Vaati's the one with the 3.2 million subscribers, so who am I to say he's doing it wrong?
His fear, she did offer him relief. Mesmer also had his soldiers and Black Knights,
Very true.
some of whom he even considered brothers in arms, but perhaps his closest companion was Gaius, described as both Mesmer's
Okay,
friend
this is gonna be...
and the leader of his men.
All right, this goes back to the whole thing with the timeline stuff I've talked about before. I think Vaati is mistaken to think that there's this big relationship between Gaius and Mesmer that goes potentially even before the Crusade. Maybe he's going to go with that, but at the very least during the Crusade, I think he's made a huge miscalculation here. I think trying to date the Liurnian Wars to before even Mesmer's Crusade is causing so many terrible knock-on effects for everything else in the timeline and stuff that I think I just think it's silly that he would go down this route. But that putting that aside, I don't think brother in arms should be looked in too closely, because it just means that, you know, they fight side by side on the battlefield, you know, neck and neck and stuff like that. Like they're a battlefield friend, sure. I'm not like they're friends in war, right? But like I don't know how deeply I would want to go into this, right? Like they consider each other comrades, which is I think a fair statement for that, right? I don't know if I would like look into be like, oh yeah, he's like these very like, you know, deep, like, oh my God, I would like, you know, die for you, brother, type of scenario. I don't know if that's necessarily where we'd go at. For him and Gaius, again, if we're going with the idea that Gaius is not someone who's been with Mesmer all the time, again, that the Liurnian Wars do not occur before anything involving Mesmer's Crusade, which I think is the more likely scenario. It still very much makes sense what's happening here. Mesmer's in the realm of shadow. He's in the Shadow Keep. He's basically all by his lonesome. Now suddenly comes in is Gaius. There's a bunch of other people besides Gaius related to the Redmanes and things like that. That's another problem, is that Gaius and you're not dating the Redmanes so much, or like so much stuff involving Radahn has to be predated in order for Gaius to make sense, because Gaius is literally like just looking at his armor, his tattered everything. He's a Redmane. Like that's the entire point, is that he was not liked even among the Redmanes, who all love Radahn and stuff like that, you know, because he's a filthy stinking Albinauric. The whole point with Gaius and Mesmer is like Gaius shows up and he's telling Mesmer about this whole thing about Radahn and what's going on outside. And presumably the idea is that like Radahn wants to understand a bit more about this realm of shadow, because hey, now he's a general, he's privy to military secrets. You know, one of them is that there's this giant shadow war going on even now. It's like, hey, this is before my time. I've never heard of this. What's that? I've got like a brother and stuff in there, whatever, that, named Mesmer. Okay, let's go talk to that brother then, right? And then with all that being said, then Gaius goes in, because Gaius is not getting much love from the Redmanes and everything like that, so may as well go fight in the realm of shadow, or like, you know, at the very least get some peace from that, where they don't care whether or not you're like, you know, corruption or something, as long as you're serving the dishonorable cause of the crusade, right? But then you have Mesmer meeting this guy, and suddenly he's learning about a brother for the first time that he's never met, right? Again, this goes back to the point. Just because they're like, oh, they're bonding over the fact that they both have Radahn as an older brother, that doesn't mean Mesmer knew anything about Radahn before meeting Gaius. Gaius could be the first one to ever tell him, oh yeah, you have a younger brother, by the way. And well, yeah, wouldn't you be interested if you suddenly learned, hey, I have a younger brother I didn't know existed? Clearly my mom's still having kids after me and my sister and stuff in the doing so. Like, imagine him hearing about the Omen. That would have been a riot, I'm sure, but I'm sure that never came up. It's like, oh yeah, Mesmer, also your mom gave birth to a few Hornsent. She did what? Yeah.
Like Mesmer, Gaius was as an elder brother to Radahn, and the two trained.
Also, it should be understood that, again, Vaati is making a conflation. What the text says is they weren't both as an elder brother, which I think would be the nuance to imply there was a relationship. It just says that they both were his older brother. Now, Gaius, it's in a more metaphorical sense, right? Because there's this concept in Japan of sibling disciples, where you are you're like you both trained under the same master, and therefore you guys are you basically are the same as like brothers. Like he's like kind of your dad essentially, right? Very much like it goes back to like, you know, the very deep connection between master and apprentice type relationships in Japan with martial arts and stuff like that, right? But there's very much this idea of, oh, we are both sibling disciples. And that makes us brothers in that sense, right? But it's not literally brothers in the exact same way, right? Like, it's more of a metaphorical brothership. Now, it uses the same terminology you use for a blood brother. But again, that's not actually what it's trying to say. So there's a bit of wordplay here where it's like, yeah, they're both older brothers to Radahn because Gaius learned under the master, and then Radahn also learned under that master, and they were learning seemingly a point together when they're learning under the master. And Messmer, right? Messmer is just, well, yeah, both of them have, again, potentially both Radagon and Marika's blood flowing through them. Therefore, he's also a brother. But he didn't know about the existence of this brother, is what I would be arguing. And again, this is where there's a huge disagreement there, because Vati really thinks that, no, Gaius has to be with Messmer from the beginning. And again, I think like I said, I think there's so many problems with that.
The same Alabaster Lord, whose tutelage led them to discover powerful gravitational
Suffering builds character, suffering builds character, suffering builds... Yeah, it does. Welcome, diminishable property rights.
Just like Messmer, Gaius was cursed.
Elden Ring timeline will never not be confusing to me. I don't think it's that confusing. I think it just takes a lot of time to digest. Like, legitimately. Again, I've done... Oh, chat, you're making me bring it out. I gotta bring it out. I think I should have done this from the start, but, like, we're gonna do it now. It's time. It's time. It's time for the obligatory timeline showcase. Ay. Let's see. Where is this thing? I always lose track of it for some reason. All right, so let's make this a little bit more. I wish the photo viewer would remember the size I make my photo views. You know, that'd be real nice. There we go. So here we have, but this is just for the Godfrey era, to be fair. But I think it's very straightforward. You got the birth of the Erd Tree, Marika becoming God, all that jazz. You got Hoarah becoming God. Oh, this is timeline 4. Okay, Hoarah becoming Godfrey. You have Altus Plateau unification. You have banishment to Penal Colony, which is basically the creation of Stormvale. You have the war with the giants afterwards. So basically, okay, Marika gives birth to the Erd Tree, becoming God. She gets Godfrey, who becomes Godfrey after he does all the fighting and stuff, defeating Sarash, all that jazz, at the Sun Capital, and takes over the fortified manor and all that jazz. Then he goes on to unite the entire plateau. So it's like, okay, we've got the base of the Erd Tree secure and all the wider area around that base. This is where they also first make their big alliance thing with the Serpent, most likely. Then you got, okay, we have all these people from this old civilization of the farm colonies, as I call them, that we're going to now banish over to the Penal Colony because they won't submit, they won't obey, they won't do it, like, they don't got anything else special to them that would make us want to obey. Okay, they get shoved off to be slaves to building a bulwark against anything potentially coming to us from the south. Okay, so giant war happens. Age of the Erd Tree. Oh, also, I should talk about this again. Another problem I have with Vati is that he comes with this idea that if there's any connection between R'hllana and Messmer and something, then that must mean the Liurnian Wars happened first. When no, there's very clearly a long history of relations between Liurnia and the Erd Tree Kingdom well before the Crusade is even happening in this assessment. So we have Age of the Erd Tree begins. Then you get, again, this is where at some point around this Age of the Erd Tree, specifically the Age of Plenty, you have Messmer and Melina being born. As I talked about earlier, this whole thing with the God Hunts and the Serpents rebelling and all that stuff, blah, 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 all that happened. Marika has Malekith sealed destined death now, okay? So let's go. Now we hit the new era. Well, the Age of the Plenty was great and all, but now it's starting to have problems. So the first Erd Tree seeds start getting released. Marika begins researching Order because she's like, hey, why is my Crucible that was supposed to be eternal dying? Then we get to Messmer beginning the actual purge. So this is where I would say, okay, this is where Mesmer's crusade happens. And then afterwards, as a response to the crusade, we get the Omen Curse happening. And then by the end of the Omen Curse with Morgott and Mohg and stuff, the Age of Plenty ends. So this seems to pass. This is when we get the Liurnian Wars. Because now, Marika's been doing her research here, and this justifies her wanting to get more information, right? So in order to get that more information, she goes to Liurnia, but she needs to actually conquer Liurnia now because, you know, they're not going to just give her free access to all their big, you know, private archives for all their learning and stuff, especially when, yeah, there's obvious tensions between the two of them going there, right? They have diplomatic relations, but that doesn't mean that things aren't like, oh, we're all buddies, right? And then the Lyrian Wars happen, and that's when Radagon goes, and that's when Radahn and stuff should be born. Then you get afterwards, you got the Ancient Dragon War, because a lot of time's passed since now, you know, the land of the center of the lands between has gone into the realm of shadow, cutting off Farum Azula from the whole hunting party for Bale. So now there's finally relations have frayed to the point where things break out with Grandsax going on the offensive. This causes the Penal Colony to rebel as well, because they're seeing all the destabilization that the Ancient Dragon War is causing and all this influence there. Then you have the Fringe Folk rebellion essentially happening, where Godfrey's now getting involved, where he's trying to put down this rebellion. He duels with the Stormlord, defeats him, takes over Stormvale Castle once and for all, does all the wonderful and golden embellishments on top of it to their Penal Colony to be like, we are now gold and all that stuff. And then we go into the war that leads us to the siege of Castle Morn, the stuff at Fort Height, the stuff in Caelid, which is where Godfrey's last battle takes place, and then finally we get to the Long March and then Radagon marrying Lyria, right? So this is like the beady part of the timeline for a lot of like the backstory stuff, right? Like a lot of the stuff before that's a little bit more vaguer, and the stuff after it is a bit more vague in terms of like not too much is happening until you get to the Shattering, right? And then that stuff eventually becomes this era where most of the information we know about, like with, you know, great degree of certainty, because, you know, it's super high resolution because it's recent, right? But like, that's a pretty straightforward timeline that I feel I've been able to suss out. Now, there have been some changes. Again, most of these are like wording changes and things like that. But like stuff like, for example, no, this is not that. Okay, yeah, like stuff like this. I originally would put the Omen Curse at the beginning of this period, right, of the Erd Tree dying, because I wasn't exactly sure what was causing the Omen Curse, only that was vaguely connected to the Crucible dying. So I was like, okay, so we'll put this like maybe it began here and would end at the here, and then I would have Marika's research happening later after the tree would properly end, when clearly that's not the case. Clearly the research was actually like a lot earlier in this process, which in retrospect makes more sense, because again, the Erd Tree isn't fully dead when it starts sowing seeds, so why would the Crucible do any different? So admittedly that was a mistake on my part, I think. But like overall, I don't think it's that complex, right? Elden Ring needs Abyssal Archive treatment overseen by GRRM and Mikhail Zeki. Do I think Elden Ring needs a treatment? No, I just think they need to release Martin's script. The fact that Martin has a prose here, and Miyazaki's gone on record talking about how great this wonderful thing is, and he feels mixed about trying to release it or something. It's like, Miyazaki, listen, this is a collaborative effort. I think it's fair if after a certain period you just release the damn thing and we get to see for ourselves. Because one, I think it would reinforce the idea that Miyazaki's work does in fact have like, solid like, text and lore and stuff behind it. Isn't just like, the claim or something. Like there's actual like method to the madness of the storytelling told in the actual games. And I think that it would be just, I think it would just be fair to everybody, right? You have this wonderful text, and there's a potential that no one's ever going to be able to see it, just because Miyazaki doesn't want to like ruin, fan discussion over it. Like I think after a certain point, like Elden Ring's zeitgeist has passed. I think he should release it then and be like, okay, here's the thing where people can go back to this game now and look at, okay, what theories were right, what was misunderstood, what was never told, or something like that. And that's why I think he may want to hold off on it, because there could be more in there that they want to have spin-offs and things cover, and they don't want to spoil that by coming out with the document too early. I think that might be the biggest hanger up, but who knows? I could be wrong. It's an idea for JP culture, but what if From Software are actually using different meanings than what we assume? JP is pretty funny language, it's full of quadruple meanings with wordplay, and a lot of localization can be justifiable. See Capridane being a more enthralling name than JP. Well, yeah, sure. There's always arguments for what the localization goes for, but like, I would not say, oh, there's this language with so much wordplay and stuff like that. It really isn't that much. Especially in the Souls game specifically. I would not say that there's so much wordplay that's like super, like, oh, there's quadruple meanings to things or whatever like that. Like, I would not go that far. There could be stuff where there could be like definitely like double meanings and things to that for sure. But I don't think it's I don't think the way that Miyazaki writes his games is to that degree of sort of like, opaqueness. If JRM's work was released, I think some symbolism plus character dynamics throughout the game may make more sense. Again, I think they could make more sense. It's just you need someone to do the analysis. Now, I hope that person's not going to be me. That's all I want, is that I don't want to be the person to have to do all that. Anyway, now that we've had our discussion, let's get into this and listen to it.
As we know, first-generation Albinaurics like this famously have no control of their lower body, relying instead on mounts like wolves, horses.
Again, I've said it in the past, I don't think the women are first-generation Albinaurics. I think they're third-generation. If you want to call them first-generation, they would be first-generation Carian Albinaurics. So I want to make a huge case there. Also, I would not include Loretta in this list. She is not an Albinauric. I'm sorry. I think that idea is well and truly dead.
Or, in Gaius's case, a boar that was his other half.
Yeah.
In spite of this Albinauric curse, or perhaps because of this very reason,
The word plays that two
there
fingers
was
are
a
literally
kinship
two fingers.
between Gaius and Mesmer. Indeed, the lore makes quite a few mentions of Mesmer valuing friends and brothers in arms. He seems to have had a pretty amicable nature, which must have made his fate all the more painful. For, on his mother's wishes,
I don't know about
Mesmer
that
made
necessarily.
himself
Like
a
maybe he's amicable. I feel like it would just tell you that he's needy for attention. Like he's happy to have anybody that he can talk to and have a genuine relationship with, because just the way, again, his life is full of suffering, right? Like he needs that release. So I don't know if I would go so far as to say like, oh, he's this really like amicable or whatever guy, right? Like there's a lot of people, who aren't necessarily amicable, but you're still friends with, right? Like I think what it tells you is that Mesmer does not shun making connections or relations from people, because he doesn't got a lot of those to work with. So like anything he can get, he's happy with.
symbol of fear.
But again,
undertaking
I've never done the full
crusade
dissection,
she
so maybe I'm
desired.
missing something there.
In doing so, Mesmer declared, "Direct thy maledictions, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone." Yet Mesmer was not the only one to suffer the consequences of his ill reputation. His Fire Knights, who each and all hailed from a renowned family of the Erd Tree's upper echelons, were shunned and chased from their homes
Yep, this
after
is true.
pledging allegiance to Mesmer as their master. Twinned golden snakes adorn the necks of these knights. Yes, they have the Gold of Order, and yes, these knights are aligned with the Erd Tree,
Yep.
but the snake clearly remains a despised symbol, and allegiance to Mesmer was thus a stain on the reputations of these highborn families who probably believed their children could do better. Yet the Fire Knights were the only ones who truly knew Mesmer, his flames like serpents, and the painful fate that accompanied his accursed.
I would actually be curious of when did the Fire Knights form? Would this be before the Crusade or during it? Like it could be before the Crusade, but like in the lead up to recruitment, and they got to know each other on a deeper level. So they're like, okay, yeah, we'll help keep your snake thing a secret from everybody else that we're trying to recruit and stuff like that. I'd say he's got some charisma. Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't know how I'd feel about the idea. Like, oh, he's got a lot of charisma there. Like maybe, but like I don't know. Yeah, I just don't. I don't know. The guy that we meet, I don't know if I would necessarily refer to him as charismatic, but it's only our one meeting, and obviously it's a hostile meeting, so I'm not sure if that's a really good example, right? If only Elden Ring had a photo mode so I could know his details like these better. I mean, there's a photo mod. Dark Souls also deserves a full-on lore Bible and unseen/scrapped. I mean, we get that with the design works. There's a lot of scrap stuff in that they include in there. It's one of the last things I want rather than a sequel. Maybe they could do like a half-life documentary style text interview. I don't think we're gonna get any more from Dark Souls on that level, or Bloodborne, or anything like that. I feel like those stories are the stories. They've told what they've told. You can pretty much get all the important bits from them by just doing an analysis of the game, and that's what Miyazaki's leaving for the community to do. It's like, hey, listen, the truth is there. You just have to see it. Oh, that's right. I remember Mesmer's in pain. It's the Fire Knight armor. Okay, so, but like, the thing with him being in pain is like, I want to know, okay, well, when did the knights get enter the picture, right? I'm very curious about that now. Like, see, I like this about this video. It's definitely, it's being vague enough that it's definitely letting me be able to think about like, ooh, what are some stuff that I'd like to nail down more about that? So like, I do like that. It's inviting more thought about it. That actually got officialized during the war, like made up of existing soldiers. Yeah, that could be the possibility as well. Again, it's just sort of the thinking of like, okay, when exactly was this line drawn? Was it like, oh, Mesmer recruited, like these are the first people who joined the Crusade, and so they became the first ones he made knights for the Order, or was it something like they were the first to join, he got to know them better, and then he officially said, I'm going to make you my own Order of Knights or something separate there. Just the developer story of working on Dark Souls and stuff and such. I think, I just don't think they're going to do, I don't think we're going to get like a retrospective like that. I would love it to be proven wrong, because I would love any scraps we get from Dark Souls, I would love to get, but like, I don't know if they'd ever want to revisit it. It'd be like saying that for Demon Souls. Like, I don't think Miyazaki's interested in revisiting, doing a retrospective on Demon Souls that way. Plus, he's locked in the Shadow Realm for who knows how long. His people's skills might have gone rusty. Yeah, like, again, I don't know how much you want to attribute to Mesmer having a lot of charisma, because, like, he seems to make, you know, friends, right? Like, you don't necessarily need to be charismatic to be friends. And again, when you're like a commanding officer, your authority is going to do a whole lot of weight of someone wanting to kiss up to you, right? Like, that's just the reality. Now, and I'm not saying like you can't have a genuine friendship from that, right? Like, that's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to say. But like, it's very obvious that, like, you know, people are kind of like in a position generally where you're going to want to get on Mesmer's good side any regardless. And I feel like, again, when it comes to Gaius and where it comes to, like, you know, becoming comrades on the battlefield with the people he's fighting, I think that more has to do with the fact that, you know what, he's their leader, he fights with them, he fights, he helps keep them alive, right? Like, he's not, you know, he's not like, you know, commanding things from the back line, right? Like, I think a lot more of that has to play into becoming his comrade, you know, his comrade in arms. And the same thing with Gaius. You know, I think it's more to do like, hey, we both have this cursed aspect to us. I don't think that's to necessarily do with Mesmer being this charismatic guy who Gaius is like really big on sharing. It's just kind of like, oh, hey, I want to know more about this Radahn fellow you're talking about. Oh, he's my brother. Well, I definitely want to learn more about this. What the hell's going on that I have a brother that I never knew about before? Oh, okay. Well, and you actually trained with this guy, and he's kind of like a brother to you too. Oh, that's really cool. I need to do so. Okay, well, how did that all go about? Oh, you're this Albinoric thing. Okay, gotcha. And you were trying to get this boar thing and write it so you can like impress this like lady Albinoric that you knew and stuff. Like, okay, neat. like I can very much see how Mesmer like makes friends with someone like Gaius without necessarily being like this really like suave, charismatic individual, you know. Anyway, this is beside the point. We're not even 30 minutes into this vid.
Form. A part of this painful fate was likely having to make himself a symbol of fear without ever revealing that truth to the masses, as there was a reason Marika instructed her son to make himself a symbol of fear.
Okay.
It's because she had a task for him, one that she should not be closely associated with, a vile crusade unbecoming of a queen, a purge without grace or honor, a crusade started by Mesmer, son of Marika.
Ooh. So we're getting to part 2, finally. Now, I think this is probably going to be the weakest section of his entire video, personally. Just because I think that there's a lot of like wishy-washiness there, which again, nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's not like to my preference. But I think there are some stuff where like I would heavily disagree with this. Some of the stuff I'm willing to give him being like, okay, I myself have not like, you know, I don't have like a crystallized view on some of these things, so I'm willing to like give the benefit of the doubt. But again, I feel like if like, again, after doing so much work regarding Godfrey's era and stuff like that, I feel pretty confident and solid on that work. And I just don't see some of the suppositions being made about Mesmer as really fitting into there, right? Like some of the stuff with the fire giants and things, I don't think that's good. I think some of the connections to the Fel God are a bit of a reach, right? So yeah, I feel like this could end up being like this section specifically. I'm like, this could be the one where I'm like, I'm not happy with any of this. This second section though, I probably think I'm going to be like, okay, there's going to be some stuff I'm not going to like in this, but I think overall, I think it's something where we're going to find more common ground on, because I feel like, again, if this is about the crusade, I feel like we got pretty good solid idea of how this crusade is working out, so we'll see. If we have more lead up to these violent characters, just boss battles. That's the style to From Software, right? Like the idea is that you are someone who are experiencing the characters as the way the characters themselves are experiencing it, and you are backfilling some of that stuff either through like some of its lead up and foreshadowing with like item descriptions and things like that, but a lot of it is something that you are going to learn about the characters after you get their souls and you get to look at the different boss soul weapons and stuff that you can get and things like that. Like it's something you're going to piece together, and that's sort of the appeal of it, is that you're seeing something, you're like, I can tell there's something significant going on here, but I don't fully understand what that is, or maybe I do, but it's very vague and indistinct because Miyazaki's trying to convey it through images and things. Like we mentioned the Capra demon earlier, like, oh look, a goat head demon, it's got like a goat skull looking for a goat skull look to its head. Oh, that reminds me of a demon, because you know Satanism and all that stuff, right?
Have you ever noticed how bored Mesmer sounds in his voice lines?
Low restrictive.
I don't know if I describe that as bored, maybe solemn, but I don't know about bored. I don't know, would you describe Mesmer as sounding bored? I don't know.
Bored Mesmer sound?
I feel like it's insulting to his actor, honestly. Anyway, let's pop off, Vati.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death. in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
Uh-huh.
Some people have chalked this up to bad voice acting, but I don't think so.
Really?
From Software has a painstaking process.
Wait, do people really think it's like, listen, I am the first to talk about the cheesy voice acting that From Software titles have had up until like Dark Souls 3 is when, like, Dark Souls 2 had a lot of really good performances, but like Dark Souls 3 is when they actually stop sounding wooden for the most part. Like, I don't know if I would call Messmer bored here. I would call him like maybe a little stilted in the delivery, because it's kind of again, I feel like it's more like solemn they're going for with him. Like, he's just kind of this guy who's just kind of like, very quiet, like demure. Like, I'm not expecting him to be very loud and emotive like Morgott, so.
For recording NPC dialogue.
Definitely not
There's
enthused.
an
I
excellent
would describe
interview
him
on
as
that.
definitely
I'll
not
link
someone
in the
who's
description.
like totally
And
like
every
enthusiastic
line
about
is
the
recorded
situation, but
with
that's about it.
Miyazaki himself overseeing the situation. So if Messmer sounds tired, disinterested, it's deliberate. And I think it's because they aren't really his words.
Now, again, I would say that, again, I would agree with Vati here, but I would also say, like, we have to keep in mind, like, it's Miyazaki, who's a Japanese man, who, again, I think he knows some English, but I'm not sure, he definitely doesn't seem, like, that confident in his command of the English language, for sure. And it's someone who has a lot, there's a lot, we know for sure during the process, there's a lot of intermediaries, right? Like, there's some of the localizers, there's some of the Japanese people, there's translators, like, there's a lot of go-betweens here. So I could definitely see someone making the case of, oh, Miyazaki may have wanted, like, a certain thing to it, but that didn't get translated right, and, like, Miyazaki not knowing all the ins and outs of the English language may, sort of took something as sounding different than how it actually than how he actually intended it to sound to an English, a native English ear. I could definitely see that case. Now, do I think that's the case with Messmer? No. I feel like, yeah, this guy sounds like, again, like a bit stolid, but like that's what I would kind of expect from a guy who's kind of grim and has a life of suffering, and like I just don't think that this is a guy who I'm expecting to, like, again, be loud and bombastic like Morgott sometimes gets, Best VA in Souls games, in my opinion, such a soothing voice. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad performance at all. I like the poor Iron voice actor. I love his reaction of finding out we are tarnished. Well, what I like about that is the fact that it's supposed to be kind of hinting to you that, because this is made clear in cut dialogue, but it's hinting to you that he heard all this from Miquella, right? Like that him and Miquella have been chatting and stuff. So he learns about the Tarnish from that, and now he's learning now that he knows what a Tarnish is. He's like, oh, so you're a Tarnish and all that. So like, I find that very interesting. It's just the idea of like, yeah, Messmer has no idea what a Tarnished is. He needed Miquella to tell him, and now this is like his first time meeting one. Like that's kind of neat in many ways, right? I don't know. I just find that kind of like, fascinating to think about, right? Like, you have this. Technically, it's another brother he never knew he had, who he's been chatting about, and he's telling about all these things again, much like with Radahn and through Gaius, all this stuff that's going on in the outside world. And he's like, wow, I didn't know about any of this.
They're the words of the Crusade. Thus, Messmer exhaustedly, almost
no, God, Don,
sarcastically
autocorrect. I meant
intones the words, even as he faces off against the graceless Tarnished.
Yeah, I was like, Iron. It's like, dude, we're talking about old Iron King who doesn't have a VA.
Embrace thine oblivion, as shall I.
Now, compare this to the way Queeline speaks, a man who zealously serves the Crusade. So desperate is he to become a second Impaler.
Queen Marika, behold, I have excised another cancer to thy joy.
While the Tarnished are graceless, it's clear that the true targets of the Crusade were the Hornsent. For, as you may know, they were the ones who wronged Marika and her kin long ago, and so Messmer's army burns them with his fire in return, branding them with agony and fear. When I say it like that, it's easy to think that this crusade took place not long after Marika ascended to godhood at the Hornsent's Gate of Divinity.
No!
But that can't be right. There had to have been a period of peace between Marika and the Hornsent, a time to set the stage for what was their eventual
Thank you, Vati.
betrayal.
Thank you for acknowledging
So there's
it.
debate over when exactly the crusade took place, but there is a consensus that it must have at least have been some time before Rennala was broken by Radagon.
Wait, is that the consensus? Because if so, like that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a pretty wide window. Like, is that really where we're talking about here? I mean, I guess it's definitely confirmable because R'hllana's involved in the crusade, right? And like she has to, Rennala has to give her hair or whatever. But like, that's a pretty goddamn wide,
abandoning her.
For
Rennala, Queen
window
of
for it.
Caria, was lucid enough to give away a lock of her lustrous black hair, a gift to her sister, R'hllana, who renounced her lineage to chase after Messmer and follow him into war.
Okay, follow him into war. Again, Vati specifically has this idea that, again, R'hllana is with Messmer from the start of this crusade. I'd argue maybe a few days, weeks into it at earliest, but not like right at the start, because again, Liurnia and the Erdtree Kingdom were not buddies post Liurnian War in this era. And the fact that she's renouncing her royal lineage to do this should be telling you that. Why is there a problem with that? Because if Vati is correct and the Liurnian Wars occurred before that, that means that in this post-Liurnian War era, the two kingdoms are happy, like allies whose royal families have been united. Remember, Radagon is supposed to be a representative of the Erdtree royal family, who is marrying Queen Rennala, who's obviously the representative of the Carian royal family, and those royalties are becoming united by this marriage. So the whole idea of like, oh, you have to renounce your entire royalty to go on to this crusade with our friend and ally, who we are literally related to. They are your in-laws, the royal family here. Like, bit of a problem, I would say. It also creates a very awkward thing, considering the implied romance between Messmer and R'hllana, which I don't really have a problem with necessarily. I just think that'd be kind of funny then, because if the idea is like, you know, essentially like, oh no, you guys are like in-laws or whatever, but you're also you also want to bang. Vati seems to have a more romantic take on the story. What do you mean by romantic? I'm not exactly sure what you would mean by that. In the game trailer, they used a more energetic take of the Messmer's flame line, so the change to a more toned down version was definitely deliberate. I guess maybe the thing is they record a lot of different audio dialogues and stuff, and I've never compared them, so I don't know if it actually is like a separate thing. I'm gonna take your word for it. Most of the DLC felt toned down a bit to focus on the gameplay / exploration. What do you mean by the toned down, like in terms of quality, in terms of like dialogue and story and stuff like that? I mean, my only big complaint about like the story is the fact that it ends up, you know, having Radahn as the climax with Miquella. Like, I found that to be just lame. Very Roman. Oh yeah, it's a very Roman kingdom, clearly. That's why Vati wants it to be romantic, clearly. All right, let's continue.
In order to prove her loyalty to the Erdtree.
We may have to stop this, by the way, just because, again, it's getting late, Jet, so I don't want to keep going on this forever. But, like, yeah, this is a long video. We're, like, halfway through and stuff like that. Maybe we're going to stop at, like, after Rennala stuff. Because that's, like, the last thing that I'm most familiar with. Vati seems more like the English Eye description, and some lore enthusiast seems more like the more concise JP text. If the idea is like, oh, Vati like kind of like tries to like have like a low resolution take on the lore, I could agree with that. Sure, I don't think he goes to the same level of depth as maybe someone like me or like a Smotown may go for it, right? I could definitely see that. In terms of like him, like, you know, like he doesn't rely on mainly the English stuff. Like, believe me, I work with him. he definitely has seen and has referenced JP text at times for this video. So again, I think more so with his analytical style. I just don't think he I just think he's got a few things wrong in his analysis of this stuff and the events, and I think it might be, again, like I said, it sounds to me like it might be brought on by him not having a firm idea of other things related to the timeline stuff, which would definitely like narrow things down more than what he's saying. I think he's coming at it from the perspective of, oh, we don't really know anything, right? Now sometimes that doesn't work because he's making some presuppositions about some stuff going into this, right? But I think there's very much an idea of, oh, well, we don't really know anything, and now we're trying to work these through. And it's like, no, we know a lot about Marika, Godfrey, the timeline, and dates on all these things or whatever. And if he was not trying to create a self-contained video, I think he might want to reference some of his past work or something, maybe more liberally, especially if he had done that type of analysis, and that would affect things, right? Again, this is, ultimate, guys, yeah, you guys know, my bias is obviously, I think I'm more right than some of my peers, right? Like, that's obviously going to be the take, right? Like, that's why I'm here, is that I think that I've got something that's sufficiently different and more accurate than them, right? And that's what every content creator, I would hope, is doing, is that they're not trying to bullshit you. They actually think, you know what, I think I've got the more right take here. At the very least, I've got a more interesting take that is worth considering, right? So again, Vati's style is not necessarily what I like, but hey, it works for him, so well, who am I to complain, right? Town in terms of what they did with DS1, 2, and 3 and Bloodborne and based ER, hard to describe other than they want to focus on levels and hiding more of the story. Listeners, I disagree. I think ER, if anything, has too much story being told to you. I was complaining about this earlier in the video about just how much like the game like gives you like blatant exposition and stuff, which I'm like, I find kind of gross coming from From Software games by comparison. Like usually it's not so blatant that you have an entire NPC just dedicated to expositing to you and giving you all the drop on the basic premise and everything. How dare you? You're such a narcissist. Like, yeah, it's like what a shocker. I say things because I think that other people don't have it right. It's crazy, I know. Most of the DLC is missable. I missed over 60% of it. Well, you can say the same thing about the open world game as well as past From Software games. Bloodborne, there's tons of missable content. Dark Souls, there's tons of missable content. Like, ultimately, it just depends on like how thoroughly you do the exploration for these games. I mean, God knows that I explored those games pretty thoroughly before I did finish my first playthrough.
R'hllana entered the arena. Ritual combat was once a custom.
Okay, there's no claim that R'hllana entered a coliseum, an actual coliseum or anything again. So I assume he's just being, he's just being, flowery here. But yeah, this again goes back to the point of, okay, why do you have to prove yourself to the Erdtree if your family, like you've already done the whole fate thing, right? You've already done the whole tears, fate, bad blood, wiped away, all that stuff. None of this should be happening in a post-Liurnian War society. Like none of this that makes sense. And this is again another issue I have with Vati saying all these things, because he's just going with the idea. Well, it's like, oh, but like Gaius is involved in the crusade. And he knows about Radahn, so therefore everything involving the Liurnian Wars has to happen beforehand, so that way we can have Radahn, so Radahn can become the Star Scourge and become a general and establish the Redmanes, so then he can proceed to not be involved in any of this stuff that happens afterwards or anything since then. Like, there's just so... Again, I think it's a bad take. I think it definitely taints this work.
Performed to honor the Erdtree, and so she donned her carrion thrusting shield and proved her loyalty.
Again, I think a lot of the changes have to do more so with not the fact it's an open world, though. Again, I think that does contribute. I think more of it has to do with the fact that it's Martin's work, and Miyazaki feels like, okay, I have to be able to get at least some of these basics out to people, because this is Martin's work, and I need to make sure that this stuff is clear. So I think in that sense, he gets a little bit more wordy than he would in the past. Yeah, I don't really have to complain about the DLC in terms of narrative or anything and how they do so. It was going to be more Elden Ring. That's what I expected. That's what we got. It was an underground fight pit under the Shadow Keep. You have the underground, like with all the like flashing lights and everything. No, I agree with you. There's the biggest problem with From Software games is that it's very hard for you to be able to get and retain all the information in one playthrough. I don't think that's the goal of any of the games. I think it's very much supposed to be, you play the game, and even if you play it only once, you then talk to other people about the game, and you discuss and you have exchanges, and you talk about your different discoveries and stuff, and maybe you'll go back and play more stuff with your new understanding and things like that. But I do think the biggest problem with Elden Ring is just that it's so big. It's so big that, like I say, ask me in another decade, maybe I'll have an Elden Ring book coming out for it. Logically to the story. Let's see. Okay, I got you guys covered. So let's go. Let's go watch this.
Alone. It's clear R'hllana went on to have a huge impact in the realm of Shadow.
Yes.
And
I think it's fair.
Literally. For here at the town of Morth, the buildings have fallen into the broken earth. The town's linchpin stone, intended to prevent earthquakes, has broken, and one eyewitness account claimed that the moon...
I do find this funny because there is actually... Because, again, the linchpin stone is a reference to an actual thing in Japan of, like, a rock that's supposed to prevent earthquakes and stuff, right? So, like, it's very much... It's a very Japanese thing that they're including here, so I'm very curious what the in-universe, like, cosmology connection is here. But I do find it funny that by dropping a moon on this town, she removes the stone and it causes basically everything to collapse. I find that funny.
Itself had come tumbling down. This was the impact of R'hllana's twin moon. In her youth, she and her elder sister, Rennala, met the twin moons, overlapping as though nestled against one another. So, just as her elder sister had the full moon and Ranni had the dark moon, R'hllana had the twin moons.
What
Many
about
carrions
Renna,
pledged
Vati?
to follow R'hllana wherever her lunar vessel would take her, and left their homeland
the
behind
Rena
in
erasure.
this act
I can't
of
believe it.
unparalleled devotion. The wolf was engraved on the wolf crest shield for them, as a symbol of the moon's pride that none can forget, no matter what remote lands they may arrive in.
Why is this unplugged?
Ymir was here too. He once instructed R'hllana in the sorceress arts and had an allegiance to the moon, though he would later abandon it, claiming it was merely the closest of the celestial bodies, nothing more.
For sure.
Even the trolls came, sworn to service. Fighting alongside them was Moonrathil, the twin Moon Knight's chamberlain, who was a friend to the trolls, proudly wielding their weapons as she fought arm in arm with her gargantuan comrades. Speaking of the
And why are there trolls, Vati? Why? How did the trolls, who have the whole fell god thing removed, end up in the Karian service with the giant war happening? Huh, Vati? Can we have us talk about that? Like, I just have to poke at this. Again, there's a lot of things that are just in plain sight here. It's like all the reasons why we should have trouble with the linear war take here.
trolls. Once, the astrologers who studied the night sky were neighbors with the fire giants, and the Sword of Night and Flame was forged to commemorate that
Oh, I
unity.
guess, again, this is him
unity
like being like,
between
we don't
the
know
night
anything, so I have to
sky
establish
and the
this.
fell
Okay,
god
fair
of
enough.
fire. Those times are long past, but here, in the realm of shadow, would moon and fire be ever together. For R'hllana remained loyal to the twin moon and to Messmer and his flame. Her helmet description claims that she chased after him, which I think suggests...
I'm surprised he didn't mention this, because if he wants to go with the whole Fell God connection, like, this would be the one. Be like, hey, look, see, the fire giants and stuff, and now it comes back. Like, I feel like just if you want to make that connection, again, I don't believe it. I think it's an analogy. I don't think it's like a foreshadowing or anything like that, right? I just think I find it funny that he's not making this connection here.
that she had an affection for him, just like her elder sister, who also clearly had a thing for men with red hair.
This is true.
But just like Radagon, who would abandon Rennala for Marika, Messmer doesn't give any signs that he returns R'hllana's affection.
I would agree
nor
with
does
this.
he seem comforted by her presence. And
I don't know about
R'hllana
that.
seems to have anticipated this, as she pursued him, knowing full well that not even the brilliance of the moon could grant him succor. Indeed, Messmer keeps to himself, in the dark, brooding over betrayal and the painful fate that his mother left him to fulfill. Sadly, unbeknownst to Messmer, his mother is long gone, and could not return to him even if she wanted to. A phantom in Castle Ensis laments, "O Marika, I beg, embrace your..."
I would argue he, especially after meeting Mikola, he probably does know, actually. Like, I would actually disagree with Vatir. I think he probably does know. I think it's more likely than not that he does know. Oh wow, what how convenient. They gave me a torch. At the end of the dark hallway.
Child, and give us a sign. How long must this holy war stretch on? If it sounds like I've skipped over the actual battle against the Hornsent,
Yeah.
you're right, I kind of have. Because I'd argue that the defining element of the war was not the fight against the Hornsent. Everything seems to point to this being a very one-sided battle. No, instead, I think the defining element of this war was how long it was forced to stretch on,
Okay,
leading
that's
to the fatigue of all involved.
That's
That
an
said,
interesting
of
angle
course,
to look at it.
the Hornsent did fight back, with the sculpted keepers, whose lion dance ritual was turned towards martial ends, and with the curse blades,
Yeah,
who
that's what I was
were a
thinking, curse
scourge
blades, yeah.
to the Hornsent and the invaders both. But they were ultimately defeated.
Yeah.
The sculpted keepers were impaled and burned in an act witnesses later described as a funeral pyre for the tower itself, and the tower of Anir Elim was sealed away in shadow, sealed by a tree that is actually a scaled-down version of the Shardu tree. Just as Marika and the Two Fingers have control over
Yeah,
light,
it really does look
so
just
too
like
do
the
they
Kirby
often
bit.
wield shadow, and with shadowy thorns encasing Anir Elim, Hornsent culture was broken beyond repair, even if some Hornsent live on. It's as Hornsent himself says.
Indeed, I think it rather plain to see. Things once broken can never be the same.
Before the tower was sealed, it towered over the invaders, and as the people of the Erd Tree sacked the land of the tower, the majesty of the tower was burned into their memory, even inspiring a secret faith in some. Though it was not enough to sway them, for the soldiers who joined the crusade had been showered in runes and rewarded with grace aplenty. Still, the catch was that these soldiers could not be properly honored in death. They would not return to the Erd Tree's roots. And
Well,
to the faithful citizens of the lands between who hope to cheat death,
I don't.
this is a dire fate
I
indeed.
don't recall that being stated. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't recall them saying that they wouldn't be returning to the Erd Tree's roots. Because we do have catacombs and stuff that they are, in fact, put in. And those catacombs are connected, or were connected to Great Roots before Deathblight, went, across time and space to infect them. So, I don't know about this idea that, there were no roots or anything involved here. Like, again, maybe I'm missing something. But I don't think that's the case. What the? Yeah, I have it. Can I not use the dagger? Like, what's happening here? Oh, it's being used as an offhand. That's why. So that's how that works. That's weird to me. Oh, it's still considered... Okay, that's why. It's still considered left. Huh. Alright. We're just gonna go up here, then. I'm getting way too distracted by this on how to use my offhand weapon with two-handing. Does that imply that the Shadow Tree is sealed in shadow like the tower? Yes, that's exactly what it's implying. That basically it's similar to how the Shadow Tree has sealed the entire center of the lands between in shadow. A piece of it at scene, or some like duplicate of it, is being used in order to seal away the tower. This also explains the tree in the parish, right? Because if they're taking pieces of the Shadow Tree, that's like, okay, we take one piece, we'll use to seal, and then we can take another piece and we can plant it in front of our new church in the keep. Actually, I just realized that now, but that's actually a really good point. Let's see. See, I told you. Yeah, you did tell me, Xavier. It's just it's not that I didn't believe you. It's just that, like, I never saw it noticed that before. Now I'm seeing, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty blatant once you realize. Because now I've actually looked at this part of the Shadow Tree very closely, so now I'm really familiar with that. So it's really cool. Anyway, let's get back to this.
Crusade had been showered in runes and rewarded with grace aplenty. Still, the catch was that these soldiers could not be properly honored in death. They would not return to the Erd Tree's roots, and to the faithful citizens of the lands between who hope to cheat death, this is a dire fate indeed. But they still had the Shadow Tree,
I guess I
the
have to
shadow
go back
of
to
the Erd Tree.
our main...
The Shadow Tree is this enduring curiosity in Elden Ring lore, so omnipresent in the DLC, and yet so devoid of any significant detail in the game's many item descriptions.
What?
Figuring out when it came to exist has been something I've been trying to puzzle out.
What?
In a previous video...
Vati! Really? Come on, Vati. That one's not hard. The game tells us from the very beginning. Gold was born that way, and so was Shadow. Like, come on. Okay, let's see where he's going with this, but like, I am legitimately surprised. I'm surprised that this was a big question for him. I've never gotten that impression from him before. I thought it was fairly straightforward. Huh. You think you know a guy. No,
proposed that it came to exist in the moment that Marika sealed away the realm of shadow behind the veil. But I'm starting to change my mind. I'm starting to think that it's been there since the Erd Tree's own beginnings.
Yes?
After all, it's born of dark notions that bear no sense of order, and this duality is the reason grace shines ever so brilliantly. So perhaps there was always the Erd Tree, and this Shadow Tree that was everything Marika did not want, and...
Yes. Yeah. Again, I'm surprised that there's this outside, like, oh my god, I've come to this discovery. Again, I'm respecting Vati for this, but it's hard for me to grasp. Because this seems like just, I don't know, this seems so basic to me. Like this really, I'm like, wow. I never even occurred to me that someone would question this, that or someone wouldn't know this, like just like going into this. Like, huh. So I guess his idea was that he thought the Shadow Tree came to be when the Lands of Shadow happened, and that the Lands of Shadow happened, obviously later during Mesmer's Crusade. Now I wonder if he's going to say, well, now we have to date the Crusade and the lands coming into Shadow the same time as the Shadow Tree, which I would not say. But doesn't that imply that Shadow was the sealing tree? No, that's not what it's implying whatsoever. What it's talking about is the Erd Tree. So it's talking about the Erd Tree, which is the golden tree. So you have the Erd Tree, which is the golden tree. You have the Shadow Tree, which is the Shadow Tree. And the point is that they are reflection of each other. It is literally the shadow of the Erd Tree. You have one, you get the other. Like it's kind of automatic. What they're talking about when it comes, and again, what you're basically saying here, Greek innovation, is that if it's supposed to be referring to the sealing tree, then what you're essentially saying is the Divine Tower gets sealed at the same time that Marika ends up becoming a god at the Divine Tower. That does not track, especially when you consider that, you know, we even need the entire point of having the gate divinity sealed and suppressed like that is the whole point obviously behind the Crusade. Like, it's clear that Mesmer is the one who's connected to that one. So the idea is supposed to be, the events of Marika becoming god, the creation of the Elden Ring in the form that we know it as, including the removal of destined death from the Elden Ring, the creation of the Golden Order, which coincides with the removal of destined death from the Elden Ring, and the creation of the Shadow Tree. All those events are happening, with the creation of the Golden Tree and the Shadow Tree, we're using the Elden Ring. All those events are happening during these same events of Marika using the Gate Divinity, and then, like, she comes out, right? Like, they're all supposed to happen in that exact same, very specific period. So Taoism, yeah, something kind of like the Tao, yeah. So it's the idea that, yeah, you have your yin and your yang here. There is gold and there is shadow, right? Very, very straightforward. I'm shocked to hear that this was like this thing, like, again, like the first trailer told us. So, like, I'm very surprised that there was this misunderstanding here. Like, I thought everybody understood that, and the argument was just when was the center of the lands between entering in the shadow into the what we call the Shadow Realm. Because again, the JP for Shadow Realm is more accurately just Land of Shadow. So kind of like how we call it the lands between, I would have personally translated it as like the lands shadowed or the lands in shadow or something like that. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. That's me like wanting to quibble with the localizers. But, like, generally it's referred to as they refer to it as the realm, but they don't mean realm in sense of a dimension. They're referring to the actual land we explore. The dimension, which is clearly hidden in shadow, which I think Vati's alluding to as the veil, and it could be that those veils are in fact connected to that. I could totally see that. I would personally say that it would have to be during Mesmer's Crusade, because there's no reason for the Hornson to be okay with being in shadow. Again, like I said, there's timeline issues with stuff, including the Ancient Dragon War if you try to date it that early. Like, there's a lot of problems here. But I felt that was where the discussion was, not this idea that, the Shadow Tree and the Erd Tree have always existed since with one or the other, like, at the same time. Like, this is wild to me. Like my mind is blown. I've never imagined, like, I've never could even consider the possibility that you could think of something like this way. Like, this is honestly, like, this is hitting me very hard. But okay, let's move on from
Thus, the Erd Tree was everything that shone brilliantly. Like the Erd Tree, the Shadow Tree still seems to draw from the gold of the Crucible, sap that was proudly collected at the Black Keep, with this giant structure that broadcasts to the entire land that the sap is theirs, and in it went into the chalice of the Shadow Tree, where that sap was later scattered to the furnace golems who drop such crystal tears. So, if we assume that the...
Oh, you know what? I did not mention crystal tears in my thing for the Shadow Tree and stuff. I'll have to look into that now. Yeah, I've not been attentive when it came to that. That's something that I'm gonna have to remember.
Furnace golems.
I don't remember if I talk about. I don't think I talk about crystal tears in the Erd Tree's beginning period. I think I only talk about. I think that's for something for Crucible's End. I'm gonna have to look at that.
Crusade
Thanks, Vati.
Always
Love
had the sap of the Shadow Tree within them, as the DLC Crystal Tear description states. Then the Shadow Tree kind of has to have existed before the start of the war, which the Furnace Golems were created for, and thus the Shadow Tree probably existed alongside the Erd Tree since its inception as well. Its existence has probably just been a secret until now. But let me know if you guys think that I'm off base with that one.
No, I think you're
To many
completely
in
on
the
base.
realm
I'm
of
surprised
Shadow, the
I'm surprised
image
that this
of the
is coming up
misshapen
now.
Shadow Tree became an edict, a proclamation that one should spurn all that exists and wound all that exists.
I don't think
So read the Thorn Spells, which were the sorceries of those who abandoned the practice of incantations after devout faith rewarded them with only despair.
Alright, bye, soul.
Denounce their ways,
Bye, Last Giant.
do them harm, for we have been abandoned.
We have been abandoned, chat. Alright. I think we're gonna end it here, chat, because it's
Bless
past
his bone
midnight for me
shot.
now. I think this is enough. There's a lot more we have to go here too. Alright, so how do I feel about the video so far? Yeah, it was about what I was expecting. The second chapter I was expecting I would like a lot more because of just how much the how to put it, just how much that the is something I think we can all universally agree on. Again, I was not expecting that curveball at the end about the Shadow Tree. That one, like, woo, clearly I really haven't been watching enough of Vati's videos, because I would have probably known about his thinking like this. I would have corrected that a lot. I'd be like, Vati, I'm surprised. Like, you should know this. Like, the whole he'd even bring it up, the whole Golden Shadow thing. Like, what does he think about that now? I don't know. Like, how does that not come up in the conversation? I am so floored. Like, it's crazy to me. But anyway, overall, I think the first section's really, like, again, there's my personal feelings about it, like, stuff. I still think it's a good video on that front, so I'm not going to be too hard on that. But there's definitely things where I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with all that. But overall, it's definitely got, it's got a lot more structure to it, and he actually explains his thoughts process. Sometimes I think more exhaustive detail than necessary on some points, but I still think that's good. And then you have the second part where I think, yeah, we can agree a lot more. I think the Rolana thing is probably the weakest part here. But other than that, I'm like, yeah, this sounds more or less fair. And yeah, I don't know how much you'd want to really talk about the specifics of the Crusade, because, like, yeah, what are you gonna say? Oh yeah, the Mesmer and Kuro have been rolling over the Hornsent, basically. The real question is, how long is the Crusade going on? Because it's, from everything we get in the game, it looks like it's still ongoing. Which is this has to be the most incompetent crusade I've ever seen in history. I mean, we have actual crusades for points of reference. My goodness. Anyway, though, we got past Last Giant. I would have liked to get a little bit farther than Last Giant, but I've had to pause, and, like, yeah, I had so much trouble with the stupid getting the shortcut and things set up like I wanted. So, like, I'm happy with at least the progress we did make here in DS2. And hey, it didn't feel as bad with DS2 when I had something else to listen to on the side. So I do love doing these types of streams every now and then. My only thing I would say, because next time we're gonna have to finish this video for sure. The only thing I'm going to say is that I hope for whatever, like, part 3s or whatever else in the future we got going with this Mesmer video is that Vati's going to wrap things up and talk about the Mikola connection with Mesmer and stuff like that. I feel like that is something that would be very important to at least establish and talk about, because I like it a lot. Hey, they have like 5 left. That's like 99.99% there. This is true. This is very true. But you know what? It's still not 100. And you know what? If after literally going through 2 reigns of Elden Lords, you still haven't managed to wipe every single one of them out, that's a skill issue. I'm just saying. Like, I can accept maybe one hiding out in a cave somewhere, but really? Really? Like, places you've actually gone through still have some of those guys alive. We're not even gonna get started on the Abyss. Okay, Abyssal Woods, I can accept a few being alive, right? I can accept that. Outside of there? No. No, you guys are not doing your job. Alright, so, chat, we're gonna end things here. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me fail at DS2 while making some commentary on this stuff. Again, I think the first video, it was cool to watch a smaller content creator. I'm just sorry to say that I think the theory is, like, just plain bad. With Vati, I have a lot of criticisms here, but, he's always got the production value there, and he is really going so far as to, like, explain some reasoning, and there's some good stuff in there still. So I wouldn't say excited, but I am very interested in seeing how it's going to pan out in the second half. You saying you done better? In terms of analysis of Mesmer, oh no, I would say that Vati probably has the best analysis of Mesmer. I definitely have not covered it, that's for sure, right? I just think that it's not perfect, you know, but you know, nothing is in life, right? Anyway, overall, I'm glad that you guys suggested these to me. It was a good, good. I learned some things I wasn't expecting I would be learning, especially about some of the content creators here. But thanks so much, guys.